right, we're off and running on the Krueger Show. Hope everybody's having a great June the 12th. It is almost 10 minutes to 9 o'clock. Running behind schedule. And, it's just because I'm a big mouth. I'm in the green room, and I'm chatting up Ethan. We're talking ball. We're talking life. And I'm sitting there, and you guys are all getting ready, and you're in the chat. And you're, where the hell are you, Krug? You're effing lazy, and you're late, and you're always late. And we got this guy. Leo, always late. And then, of course, Larry, you're fucking lazy. And then this one, lazy? How about asleep? Oh, okay. No, nobody's asleep. We're here, and we've got a very special guest, Ethan Strauss, in the house. Fantastic to have him. And, of course, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in Northern California. Check them out. Emeryville, Corte Madera, 2 locations. They're open from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. every day. Go get the brisket chili. It's all amazing. But go say hi to Damon and Mary. Tell them the Krug sent you and have some fantastic barbecue. It is absolutely the best. We're also brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Check the link in the description. Use the promo code Krug, K-R-U-E-G, and they will match you up to your first $100. And tonight's live stream is also brought to you by our good friends at Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles. My good friend Anthony Catania, who lives down in Monterey, he's roughing it down in Pacific Grove. Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles, really cool sports card store. Anthony is there at 831-521-5264, and they do the first Friday of every month. They go like kind of like a sidewalk deal, and they're out in front, and they got food, and people are walking around, and it's really cool. So check out them if you're down in Pacific Grove. And believe it or not, he's gotten a bunch of calls from Krug Show fans. So thanks to Anthony for sponsoring the Krug Show. All right, Ethan Strauss is in the house. House of Strauss. You guys know him well. He's covered the NBA for a long time. He was with us before. He does fantastic stuff, and he's got a great piece out right now. Of course, we're going to get into the passing of the great Jerry West, and we're going to talk a little bit about NBA Finals game number 3. If you missed it, Boston went up 3-0. Looked like Dallas was going to do it, and then we forgot Luka doesn't play any defense. And Luka can't make a 3-footer. I don't know why, but he can't make a 3-footer. And Boston just turned it on, and Jaylen Brown and Tatum, they're just too much. And they're just letting Tatum do his thing and then trying to guard everybody else, and it's just not working. And they're down 3-0, and they're going to lose probably in 4 straight. And this has been kind of a snooze playoff. So we'll get into that. We'll get into Brock Purdy. We'll get into some of the interesting people that Ethan has met on the path. We'll talk a little Brandon Ayuk potentially. But I want to start off with your Lakers story, Ethan. So tell us a little bit about the angle that you chose with this story with the Lakers, and let's get into it a little bit.
Well, in a way, it's as much an NBA media story as it is a Lakers story. And I want to emphasize this because I'm assuming a lot of the people watching right now are huge NFL fans because that is the thing that you do primarily. You do all these other things well, but you do NFL primarily. I think the NFL media is so much more normal than the NBA media. And some of you might know this, that there was this big hullabaloo during the first 2 finals games about how the Lakers were going to hire Dan Hurley from UConn. Woj, he swooped in as the top news breaker for ESPN. And big headlines. And so when we had the NBA Finals to talk about before it was ultimately settled, as it just has been, we weren't so much talking about that. We were talking about this story that has turned into nothing. It's turned into nothing because the Lakers did not offer Hurley near enough money to get the job done. So it makes you ask, what was this all about? And it hasn't turned into anything. And so it's just this big mess, and it's this big mess that once you start peeling back the layers of it, it reveals a whole lot about the weird way that NBA media works and how it interacts with some of these situations like the Lakers, which are a bit of a circus. I think the Lakers, because LeBron James has given them a structure, it's completely hidden just what a mess they are. And maybe we can talk about that in the context of a Jerry West. Then, after Jerry West, after Mitch Kupchak, the Lakers are just a situation that is very messy and creates chaotic outcomes and ultimately gets played by people. gets played by Dan Hurley, gets played by Wojnarowski. So that's what the story was about. But it's, it's like 3,500 words, and I narrated it. So it's difficult to summarize, but I can get into any aspect of it. I'm happy.
Well, I mean, what are the Lakers going forward? I mean, if you just look as a basketball team, because you got to ask yourself. I mean, obviously, it's a name job. I mean, it's a big name job, right? It's one of the glamour jobs in the league. But what are you getting if you go there? Are you getting fired? Because it seems like
yes, I was going to say fired. Yes,
they had a guy who won the title there in the bubble, and they fired Vogel. He's out of there. Darvin Ham, a lot of people think did a good job there, and he's out. We know Laker fans have way, way unrealistic expectations. We're going to contend for titles. Why? Because we're the Lakers. It's like, well, what? I mean, what? LeBron is ancient. Anthony Davis is broken down or on the verge of breaking down. And I don't see a lot there.
Well,
I'm not sure
that's
if
why the story was. That's why the story was crazy. This was a crazy story. Just the whole thing. And Woj touting it and saying that, oh my God, this is going to be a Godfather offer for Dan Hurley. And then when it doesn't happen, because it's not enough money, Woj is saying, oh, he might look back on this with regret. With regret? What are you talking about? Everybody who takes this job gets fired, and the reputation is worse for it afterwards. The last time a coach really had his reputation elevated by coaching the Lakers, and I don't mean to be crude, but he happened to be sleeping with the current owner. I'm referring to Phil Jackson. For those of you who don't know, you can look it up. Everybody else, it's gone bad for them. You hear rumors about how Vogel, it's kind of broken him, that experience. It was not good for Mike Brown. It took him a while to get back and rehabilitate his reputation. And I think one of the reasons it goes that way, frankly, is Jeannie Buss. And I think that the media is a little bit reluctant to talk about this. I think that she is an easy source. She's somebody who will talk. And so people are protective of sources to a degree. But it's a little reminiscent in a weird way of the Cohan years with the Warriors. And the worst thing that you can have in an organization in basketball is a power vacuum. With the Warriors in those days pre-Lacob, that power vacuum was a hermit at the top. And when you have a power vacuum, you've got Game of Thrones schemes, and you've got people stabbing each other in the palace and just trying to accrue whatever bit of power they can get and not really caring about the general vision of the franchise. Jeannie is more present. She's not Cohan, but she doesn't want to rule. She just likes having her friends in there. And she's got a lot of friends, and there are maybe 10 people who you'd say are in the Laker inner circle. Linda Rambis, maybe being the top one. Kurt Rambis, her husband, former Laker. A guy by the name of Tim Harris, who Jeannie Buss used to date. And I could go
this
on
already
and on.
Sounds awful. I mean, just right there. If this is all I knew, the last three sentences, that just sounds like they're doomed for failure.
Yes, it's not good. It might be why for 6
had Jerry
years
West
before
once upon
LeBron.
a time.
Well, they had Jerry West once upon a time, and the tragedy of it all, I don't want to be negative on a day like today, because it is a day to remember the great things about Jerry West, but it was hard not to notice that the most muted of people saying those great things happened to be the Los Angeles Lakers. They took longer than anybody, it seemed, to give a statement. The statement was fairly perfunctory, and people who in the know understand that there's bad blood there. And I think it reveals the smallness in the wake of West and how the people running the operation have ultimately spurned him and not given him his due. They took his season tickets. They fired his son. It's not a good situation. And maybe for the Warriors fans watching, as much as we might have this or that gripe about the situation with the Warriors, I think the Lakers are just in a bad way, and it has been obscured by LeBron. Whatever you think of him, he will raise your floor to a certain level where you don't see all the problems. And when he leaves, I believe that chaos is going to be represented like it just was. I mean, this was a mess, what just happened with their coaching search.
And ultimately, I mean, I've heard Jay Wright We obviously have heard JJ Redick. Who do you think is going to get the gig?
I think it's a little bit up in the air right now. And what I wrote and what I'm told, the situation, if you ask most people in the league, was that JJ Redick had that signed, sealed, and delivered. Okay, and this year's I'm going to try to speed run my article just a little bit. Subscribe to House of Strauss. I like to spill the tea, as they say. Talk about the industry secrets. Talk about the actual influence on media on the product on the floor, because it's very entangled in the NBA with ESPN. So here's the crazy situation that the Lakers found themselves in. They appeared to want to hire JJ Redick to be the coach. He had a podcast with LeBron James, as you might know. So that's already kind of weird, but they like him. He's smart, and he's on these ESPN NBA broadcasts. He's broadcasting the finals. He's on the lead announcing team.
Not
but that's
well,
a little
by the
bit
way, but yes. Go
ahead. Not well, but they want to keep
well.
him because the guy in charge of that operation is a guy by the name of Dave Roberts, who hired Doc Rivers before JJ, and Doc Rivers fled. Egg on the face of Dave Roberts when Doc Rivers fled to take the Milwaukee Bucks coaching job. And Dave Roberts...
Not that I keep it jumping in with these annoying asides, but Lawrence Fishburne does not recognize Doc Rivers, despite the fact that he's his doppelganger and will play him in a feature. He had never heard of Doc Rivers. I'm not a sports fan, is I think what Lawrence Fishburne said.
I love the theater people. I love that they're just from a different world. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that snippet. Al Bundy's crushing it in the Sterling role, but that's neither here nor there. Okay, so JJ Redick is announcing the games for ESPN. ESPN has had a problem because Doc fled. Dave Roberts is an intimidating figure behind the scenes, the guy who runs ESPN NBA. He's scary. He threatens. I'm not saying that it happened, but I know that JJ Redick was feeling pressure that he couldn't leave or mess with the broadcast to announce that he's, I don't know, taking a Laker job. So in the interest of everybody, it's hush, hush, quiet, quiet. Then Shams comes out with a report on June 4th that says that JJ is the leading candidate and the Lakers are zeroing in on JJ. That same day, and this is just one of these weird things. This is the main thing I'm trying to tell you guys is the NBA is weird. Football is not this weird. The same day on June 4th at UConn, Gino Auriemma is given a lavish 5-year extension. These two events are seemingly unrelated. They're on opposite sides of the coast, but they're on a collision course because out at UConn, we've got Hurley, and he was expecting to get paid, right? And he turned down Kentucky, so there went his leverage, and he was expecting to get cashed out. Gino Auriemma looks like he's, half a step towards retirement. He's getting near $20 million. Like UConn must have had more money than they told me. So all of a sudden, that's like one ball rolling downhill in a certain direction. The situation at ESPN when Shams reports that JJ is going to be the Laker coach, basically, it's a bad situation. JJ doesn't like it. He doesn't want it out there. He says he's going to have something to say to Shams. He wants to keep that under wraps. But if he's not officially the guy and he's not officially taking this job, it's a vacuum. That vacuum gets filled then with this whole Dan Hurley situation where Hurley is trying to get leverage, flies to the West Coast to interview for the Laker job. And then we've got a situation where the Lakers seemingly change their mind about Redick because they have so many chefs in the kitchen. So you can change your mind about things. And now it seems like it's not going to be Redick. Hurley turns it down because they're a Mickey Mouse operation. They offered him just the 6th largest amount of money for a coach, which is crazy because how are you going to pluck the top college basketball coach with that kind of offer? And it's just a giant mess. It's just a completely giant mess. Now they're talking about James Borrego. I don't think anybody's excited about that. So
he's supposedly the favorite.
I mean, he's the guy left. He's like their third favorite choice. And the Redick thing is weird because I think in a way they kind of turned on him. There's rumors that Linda Rambis, who holds a lot of sway, might not have been wholly comfortable with the Redick option as she thought about it. And also, it's just embarrassing. A lot of the Woj reporting was presenting it like they could either have the greatest coach of all time. I think Woj called Hurley literally the most sought after coach in basketball. And JJ just was presented like, a podcaster. And so I don't know if JJ even wants the job at this point, and I don't even know if they want him. So it's just a reminder.
What kind of coach is he? We don't even know what he is as a coach. He's a total unproven entity.
He is a total unproven entity.
I mean, all that we know is the guy could shoot once upon a time, and he can kind of talk.
Yes, we know that he knows how to launch a successful podcast. We know that much about JJ Redick. I feel like neither option, by the way, would probably work. I don't think Dan Hurley would work. College coaches almost never do.
Connecticut with all of his rules and he grips everything super tight, and he's all emotional. That was a train wreck. When I saw that, I thought, is there a worse fit than Dan Hurley and the Lakers in Southern California? I mean, it just does not fit.
It never made sense. It looked like a total leverage play. Now, the interesting part of it was a leverage play, but it seemed like Woj really wanted it to happen. That's one of the things I hear, is that Woj wanted this, and that's where it gets interesting. Schefter in the NFL just tells you the news. In the NBA,
Woj has a rooting interest in it? Why is that?
Because it's all part of the battle for information. And the battle for information, you need your keeps. You need your people. If you have your people running certain operations, then it helps you stave off Shams. The strength of Shams Charania's reporting is through agents and players. I mean, yeah, everybody has a little bit of everybody, but that's the strength of it, right? Shams is a young guy over at The Athletic, and Woj is in a vicious battle with Shams, who is his former protege, who he used to say was going to be the top newsbreaker.
This is like a Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker kind of.
Yes, I love going through this. I mean, I hope I'm summarizing everything properly for those of you who do not know.
Who's good and who's evil between those two? Who's the good guy? Who's the evil guy?
Well, Woj hates me more, so I guess I'll have to side with Shams. But I think there's, as they say in Game of Thrones, there's good and evil on every side.
There you go.
So yes, they worked together at Yahoo. Woj elevated him, and then there was this friction between them where Woj probably thought Shams was getting a little too big for his britches, and they are in a vicious battle. Now, Shams approaches that battle as a younger guy. And if you go to Vegas Summer League, you might see him in a nightclub with the players. Now, if you go to Vegas Summer League, you might also see Woj in the Chandelier Bar with Tom Thibodeau and middle-aged guys in the sport. So how do you continue to get the information that you need to get? If you're Woj, you just need to get guys who are, your guys at that level. A 51-year-old Dan Hurley, that's a very valuable thing to have him running the Lakers, because Shams has broken a lot of news through the Lakers and through clutch sources. And so it's all part of this whole crazy battle to be first. I think it's all insane. I don't know why people care so much who tweets out a story first, but that's what's driving this whole thing. And then it jumps the guardrails, and at a certain point, it actually starts to influence and impact the sport itself. And the way Woj does it, that I think Shams doesn't. I think Shams doesn't go about it this way, but Woj wants to be a power broker. So it's not just I want to be friendly with certain people. It's, hey, owner, you know who I am. I'm the most famous newsbreaker. I know everybody in the league. You know who you should hire? You should hire this guy. This is the guy you should hire as GM. So it's just a crazy
power and
thing.
Influence of Woj.
It's a fascinating world. And I feel like the NFL is fascinating. The NFL is just more fascinating on the gridiron, right? Every game is competitive. The NBA can't say that, not in the regular season. But the NBA just has all the Game of Thrones machinations, all the egos, all the superstars trying to wield their power.
It's a freaking soap opera. It's a soap opera.
That's what it is.
It's beautiful. That's what sports really is. It's man soap opera. But the Lakers are really, they're true Young and the Restless or whatever. They're the top of the soap opera. And in the midst of this whole thing now, on my good friend, the great Frank Red, is in the house. If you don't mind if Frank joins us Frank has
Sure.
got the In the Dungeon show. What's up, Frank?
Hey, Frank.
Good to see you, man.
Gentlemen, how are you guys doing? It's great to be on with you all, talking basketball and everything else topical.
Do you know Ethan Strauss?
I don't, but I was listening to him earlier, and touche. I like it.
Thank you.
Yeah, man.
Frank played at Fordham and hosts the In the Dungeon show, and is a good friend of mine. And I'd sent him a note about that we were going to do this, and I wasn't sure if he could jump in because I know he probably had some thoughts on Jerry West, who we haven't even got to yet. We've been talking about the Lakers so far.
Yeah.
One of the topics that I wanted to get, spin this to is the Warriors, because obviously so many of my basketball fans in the audience care about the Warriors. We did a lot of post games over the last few years, and obviously we would have done a whole lot more if they'd made the playoffs this year. And so I kind of missed that crescendo in the late spring, early summer that we had talking a lot of Warriors on the channel. And I haven't talked as much Warriors as I want to. But I did fill in on last week on 95.7 The Game, and obviously that's the flagship station for the Warriors. And there's a lot of dialogue about KD and Brandon Ingram, and there's all these different names floated around. I get into these kind of knockdown, drag out arguments because quickly the conversation goes right to trade or not to trade Jonathan Kuminga. And I'm totally against trading Jonathan Kuminga.
Oh, I'm kind of for it.
And here's why, because he was 19 and now he's 21, and look at the difference in 2 years. And at 23, he's going to be incredible, and he's going to have 10 years to go minimum to play at a really high level. To me, at the low end, he's Gerald Wallace. At the high end, he's more like a Kawhi Leonard, and maybe a little bit more power-oriented, less of a perimeter guy. But he's coming on, and I love Kuminga. I don't want to see Kuminga moved. There's a big sentiment among Warrior fans that's like, you know what? Move him, and find the Robin to Steph's Batman. But I really don't like the idea of just, you're near the cliff and there's, Jimmy Butler, who's 35 making 50 million. And it's like, you just speed right off the cliff and trade all your young assets for a guy who you might know before halfway through the season that it's not going to work. And then you're in like, mode. So I don't know. I mean, they better be. Dunleavy had a really good offseason last year. Pajemski and TJD were fantastic, especially at 19 and 57. You got to be kidding me. But they're in a very precarious spot because they've got some assets, they've got some image, they've got Steph, they've got some young players ascending. They could make they're a great move or two away from being a 4 seed, and they're the wrong move or two from setting their franchise back like a decade. So that's where I'm at with Golden State. Go ahead, Ethan. Give me your thoughts, and we'll let Frank jump in and give his thoughts on this.
I disagree with you on this one. Now, obviously, the devil is in the details, right? It depends on what's available. It depends on what the trade is. But I am very open to hearing all offers. Maybe we could analogize it to how you really liked Ayuk, but you understood, given the situation going into the NFL draft, that it was time to listen to some offers just because of what had to be done. And that's how I see Kuminga. Do I want to just give up Kuminga and get him off the team? No. I think maybe he could really pop. Maybe he could really blossom. Maybe his handle really could improve. But right now, despite his efficiency and how he looks like a dominant physical presence, defensively, he could be that. He isn't that on defense yet. He hasn't put that together. And the way he plays just doesn't seem to really mesh with their style, their intuitive sharing the ball style. He's more of a one-on-one kind of player, slow everything down. Pajemski looks like he fits. I wouldn't say that about Kuminga. So I just look at it as this roster needs to be optimized. And I don't think you should necessarily go get Jimmy Butler, but let's say I mean, he's not available. This already happened, but let's say, Drew Holiday, maybe you wouldn't have wanted a guy like Drew Holiday last season, but oh my God, I think he would have been amazing
Yeah,
on
no,
the
I'm a
Warriors.
big Drew Holiday fan. I would have
Yeah.
loved to have had Drew Holiday.
I know the salaries don't match and all that. This is like a hypothetical, right? There are just certain guys who would fit what they're trying to do right now because they've got a very short window. They've got 2 years. 2 years of Steve Kerr's contract, 2 years maybe of Steph being Steph. And you've just got to maximize that. So I look at it as, it's not that I hate Kuminga or want him gone. It's just there's no other move to make really that could potentially make them better within this window. It just doesn't seem to exist. The other options don't have trade value. So I just look at that as that's the one chip you have. And maybe the deal just isn't going to materialize, kind of like Ayuk, where that deal hasn't materialized, but they've got to be open to looking. They've got to be open to finding that deal potentially.
Frank, where are you with the Kuminga? Kuminga's an enormous talent, we know, but he's also, I agree exactly with what Ethan's saying. Asset wise, he is their most valuable asset. The question is, do you move your most valuable asset? What do you think, Frank?
One of the things that's impressed me about Kuminga, as agonizing as he can be during the season at times when he appears to be fighting what they want to do, is Duke puts out some really good workout tapes in the summer. And if you look at where he started a couple of years ago, every summer he's in the gym working on stuff, improving at a rate that you don't really see with a lot of young guys. And the numbers kind of lend itself to the workout. So, I've been thinking a lot about it. I think Kuminga this year is going to average between 18 and 20 a game, 6 rebounds, and probably 3 assists. If you extend him, you know what? It's not going to be that bad. And I don't know if they have to do it, but you're talking about 120, 130, 140, something like that. So it's really about whether or not you believe in him. All right. Do you trust this guy to be one of the signature players of your organization? There's only one guy that I would consider trading Kuminga for off the rip, and that's Kevin Durant. And
I might consider like a Lauri Markkanen. Markkanen's been a really good all-star player. I mean, if Utah's willing to move Markkanen, I'd be willing to move Kuminga. But that's where I would start my Kuminga, market. I don't want to trade him for a 35-year-old guy. The whole thing is there's going to be a season in 3 years. And it's like, do you want anybody to go to this arena? This arena is opulent, which is awesome, but that also means super expensive. And, in some ways, I said this to Radnich when we both toured the arena for the very first time. I said, this thing is so nice that it almost is like the Warrior basketball people have challenged the Warrior, or the Warrior business people have challenged the Warrior basketball people to make sure they have a team that's worthy of spending the kind of money that it's going to take to, be a season ticket holder at an opulent palace like they have right now. So I just don't know if they get one more ring for Steph, great. But if you don't get one more ring for Steph, or if all of a sudden there's injuries, and older basketball players tend to get injured, I don't know. I mean, it just seems like you're 3 years from now, you could have a 10-year down cycle. I mean, maybe not, but it just seems like that's what's coming.
Would you mind if I just told a little digression story about how that arena got built? Just because I think it's so funny to me. I just think it's so funny how life goes sometimes, and how things worth $1 billion can be built up. The Warriors were boxed in. They couldn't find anywhere in San Francisco to build that arena. It's hard to build an arena in San Francisco. This is some of the most valuable land on the planet. And they tried and they tried. They tried by some peers. They couldn't get it done. And it just seemed like they were screwed. Well, Mark Benioff, tycoon of Salesforce, just happened to have a bunch of land down there by Mission Bay. And he called him up one day and he said, sure, you know what? I don't want it anymore. I decided I don't want it. We built so much stuff in downtown San Francisco that I've just got all this land. And you know what? I like you for a good rate, cheap rate. Joe, I will save you. You can build the stadium. Just a complete Hail Mary godsend that this got done. When you were doing that tour, Larry, I was probably doing the tour of the arena around the same time, and I saw Benioff right outside the arena. And he is 6'5". He's a big guy, but he's just dressed in absolute trash clothes, rumpled hat,
Right.
and very unassuming. So I just started asking him these questions, and I asked him, well, why did you do that? It seemed like you didn't even make any money on the deal. And he shrugged and he said, yeah, I was just tired of schlepping down to San Jose to see Elton John. And that's why the Warriors have their stadium. That's why they have their arena. Mark Benioff, super duper billionaire, was just sick of going down to San Jose to see Elton John. And that's why they've got that opulent palace. Now, look, how does that factor into what we're talking about? Not at all, but I think it's funny. I think
sometimes you got to hear Rocket Man. When you got to hear Rocket Man, you got to hear Rocket Man.
You got to hear Rocket Man, and yes, they should have named it the Salesforce Center. The Salesforce, by the way, because of this, has the most opulent suite in all of Chase, because it's like a super suite because of what Benioff did for them. Now, okay, they've got to fill those seats. They've got to have a good team. I think one of the lessons that we might be taking from these finals and from these playoffs, the NBA has more parity, so it means the Warriors are not as far away as it might seem like they are. I think what was their point differential? It was like +2. I mean, that's not that far away in the Western Conference. And maybe we got to get out of this whole looking for a star. That seems more like the old model. The Boston Celtics are about to complete a dominant finals, and I don't think they have a superstar. I mean, you could argue for Tatum or Brown.
I guess Tatum and Brown are both playing really well in this series.
Well, I mean, you could argue it for them, but it would be an argument. It's not like with Luka, where that guy's a superstar. I mean, this is just obvious.
Right.
And a lot of what makes them them.
Why is Luka a superstar, though? That's your question. Why? I mean, when I watched that, why is Luka a superstar? I saw a guy tonight.
He doesn't play D, that's for sure.
I mean, he's great, but he's a one-way player. Jaylen Brown is kicking his ass.
True.
I mean, Jaylen Brown is an unconventional superstar because he shows up every night. At all 82 games, he shows up. So,
well, okay. The way I would explain it is this:
almost a triple-double for Jaylen Brown tonight.
What you're saying is true, but the Celtics are the one team to really expose that flaw of Luka because of what they've built with all these players who are all good, as opposed to like a team of superstars. I loved what Drew Holiday said about their team. He said, even our white guys guard. Everybody will guard. Everybody will guard one-on-one.
Hauser.
Yeah, everybody will guard one-on-one. And this is messing with Luka. In theory, the Wolves, they had the best defensive efficiency. They were the best defensive team, but not really. Not in the same way. They had guys that needed to be hidden. They had bigs who couldn't dance with Luka. The Celtics roll everybody out there and they go, one-on-one, Luka, we're not sending help. We're not letting you get these assists. We're not letting you get these lobs. And yeah, you're going to score efficiently because you're an offensive genius, but you're fat. Let's just be honest. He's fat for an NBA superstar. I mean, it's amazing that he can be a top 3 player in that condition, but because the Celtics have such defensive quality on their roster, they can suffer it and they can weather it, and they can just keep having Luka go one-on-one. Because Luka doesn't want to do that all game. He wants to get into the rhythm. He wants to solve the pick and roll. You send the help. He's like an AI. He finds the right guy to pass to. The Celtics, man, a lot of people doubted them as they didn't look like the traditional championship team, but defense is half the game. And having a bunch of guys that can guard one-on-one and also do a few other things, shoot threes, what have you, it's enough. And it's almost like we forgot what won it all for the Warriors. Draymond was talking about how him and Steph were laughing to themselves, thinking that we weren't good enough to win a championship, and they just keep winning game after game, ironically against the Celtics in the finals. That wasn't a team of superstars. That was a team of just really good role players. So with Podziemski, I think he could turn into a guy. There are other guys, TJD you mentioned, Moses Moody. I mean, they've got guys who can turn into guys. I think it's just a matter of finding the guys who fit. And I just don't think that they're as far away as it seems. And the Celtics might be a lesson in that because, yeah, Jaylen Brown, really good. Tatum, really good, but they don't have what you used to need in the NBA, which is multiple superstars, multiple, top 5 players to be dominant. It's a different league right now.
Let's go through Golden State for a quick second here. Let's just, quickly, would you bring back Clay? I would not. I would let Clay move on.
I bring him back. Unless you have a name of a player who's better, I would bring him back. I would bring him back at a number, though. And he would have to feel comfortable with the number that I'm comfortable with. That's somewhere between 25 and 30 million. And if he can't work with that, then he has to go. But I think that he's still young enough. His professionalism, his knowledge of the offense, his leadership, all of those things, I think. You look at his numbers last year. He averaged 18.5 a game. He shot 38% from three. And he shot 43%. The second, that's not horrible. That's top 15, top 16 two-guard in the NBA. So for that particular price, I would actually bring him back. Beyond that, I would have to explore something else.
Didn't look good against Sacramento in that last game.
He looked terrible. He looked terrible in that game.
He looked terrible in the elimination game the season before that, and I feel like there's just got to be a conversation with him. He seems a little ornery. It seems like some of the information coming out, he seems bitter. I don't know why. They cashed him out after the injury. It seemed like he was upset that Draymond mentioned it, but it's true. And I don't know where his head's at, but, I talked about Drew Holiday earlier, right? I think Drew Holiday is really instructive of how you can get more with less. Now, Drew Holiday last season with the Bucks, where sometimes he would have to be the second guy when Chris Middleton might go down with an injury. I think he was averaging 19 a game. And I think this season he's averaging 12 a game for the Celtics. But in many ways, he's just a more impactful player, possession for possession, because he's just focused on doing what he does well. He plays vicious defense, and it seemed like every postseason his efficiency would just go in the tank, but not right now. He's got the energy to hit around half his shots, and he's just a help to them every time he's out there. Now, that's all possible because he has embraced this role. He's not clinging to being the Drew Holiday of when he was 25 years old. I don't know if Clay is there yet, but it seems like there's got to be a conversation with him where, look, we need to bring you back for a number that's reasonable, and you're not going to be the Klay Thompson all-star guy. That's not going to help us as much. You're in a different phase. We need something different from you. Some of these young guys need to develop. I don't know if Clay is there, but that just seems like what's necessary. And again, you're just trying to learn from whatever succeeds and whatever wins. And looking at the Celtics, seeing some guys who could maybe be guys with bigger roles elsewhere, but they've got a smaller role here and they're a part of winning. That just seems to be something that Clay has to embrace. And it can't just be every time I get the ball, I'm going to shoot and I'm going to be great again. That just doesn't seem realistic. And it doesn't seem to be what's going to help him.
If the Warriors get what they want and they can have an off season, what's an ideal off season for them look like? Who do they get to come into this situation to change the dynamic and vault them from where they're at, which is, get beat by Sacramento badly in the play-in game, to actual title contender in the twilight years of Steph Curry's incredible Hall of Fame career? What player can they realistically get to get to a point, and based on obviously what they're gonna have to trade to get that player? I mean, are they a contender if they can get player X, and who is that player?
I'm going to go with Frank first on that, because I think we talked about some options. We talked about some like hybrid guys who could play make a little bit. I think the main thing is about taking the pressure off of Steph. I think he's got too much on him offensively at this, at his age currently. But it gets hard with the specifics because of where they are, the way salaries match right now. I so fear throwing a name out there and it doesn't work. It doesn't work for the trade machine.
I'll throw you a trade that works. Okay. I'll throw you a trade that works.
Give me a trade that works. Yeah.
Okay. And then I heard this, that Orlando might be interested in Andrew Wiggins. So
Okay.
Wiggins and Moses Moody to Orlando for Jonathan Isaac and
I'm intrigued.
Cole Anthony.
I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued. Look, Isaac, you gotta have him do a physical. We got to do a physical on Jonathan Isaac.
What a defensive player he is, huh?
I mean, I think an intriguing guy, a lot of talent, hasn't flourished because of all the injuries. So we got to get him in for a physical. We got to see what's up with him. But that might be the high risk move they just got to make. I mean, they're in a position, like you said, they're in a tricky spot. You might tell me you can't do that because Jonathan Isaac is an injury case. And I might say, well, you got to roll the dice, right? I mean, you got to do a move that.
I mean, Kristaps Porzingis was an injury case and didn't play tonight, by the way, but that looks like a pretty nice little get by the Boston Celtics.
Oh yeah. No, that fits really well. No, I like that deal. I like that deal.
That's a really
Frank,
good
what do you
deal.
think?
I like it. I mean, Jonathan Isaacs, I've been trying to get into a Warrior uniform for years because he's undervalued. All he needs is playing time, and he's been hurt a lot. Now, one of the sneaky things that I would love to see the Warriors do is move up off of that 55th pick because
who do you want?
Harrison Ingram, a kid who played at Stanford with the Carolina last year. He's probably rated within 30 to 45-ish, but I think he's a first-round draft pick. I think this guy, he's a two-way player. He's 6'7", 6'8", smart, playing at Stanford. Watching him play, he'll fit into their offense. He's a physical guy. Without Chris Paul, having Pods be the extensive backup point guard, that scares me. I would look at Monte Morris, who I think, if they can get the cap situation down, might be in line to get that mid-level exception, maybe half of it, not all of it. But I think Monte Morris is very undervalued. And I would love to see Dunleavy Jr. show his chops and go out and get some big Euro who can actually play, who they can sign.
When you say Euro, you're talking about a big man who can shoot it. I'll tell you the guy that I would love to get is Santi Aldama out of Memphis.
There you go.
I think Aldama can flat out shoot the basketball.
Somebody's physical.
I love Larry Scouting. I mean,
you like my Santi Aldama? Santi Aldama, come on down.
I love that you pulled that one out.
Yeah, nobody cared about Isaiah Hartenstein like 3-4 years ago. That dude's going to be paid $20 million a year just working his ass off of grit, toughness, and physicality. Go get that guy. Not him, but a player of that particular ilk.
I was thinking it was funny. I was sitting there and I'm looking at the NBA draft.net. Maybe this is giving you a little glimpse into the late night soul of Larry Krueger. I'm looking at NBA draft.net and I hit 30 for 30 and I got attracted to the Bad Boy Pistons. So now I'm watching the Bad Boy Pistons on 30 for 30 and Jack McCloskey was their architect, right? He was the guy who hired Chuck Daly, and McCloskey, it really was an underrated GM. He said that he saw Lane Beer playing for the Cavaliers and that they were just getting drubbed, but he just was absolutely competing like a madman. And he's like, I got to have that guy. I got to have Lambeer. And if you think about it, I mean, we all hated Lambeer. He was a heel, but I mean, Lambeer was kind of before his time. He was a perimeter shooting big who also rebounded and was kind of a nuisance and was a interior presence and played really hard and competed and smart player. In some ways, I kind of feel like if you could say what would the Warriors ideally add, if they could add a younger Lambeer type guy, that would be nice. Somebody who could shoot from the perimeter, but is also kind of tough. And they have kind of like the smaller inside guy in Trace Jackson Davis. And I love Trace Jackson Davis, but if you could find somebody, and Looney just seems so heavy legged and like at the end, even though his actual age is young, but his body's old. I just feel like if they could find that one young big man who could give them some help in some of those interior categories, rim protection, rebounding, weak side shot blocking. Like when I see the Lakers, they got Jackson Hayes. I wouldn't mind Jackson Hayes,
Yeah, the Mavericks got a couple of them,
Yeah, I mean,
like
there's some there are some young players out there that can potentially do it. I like Jericho Sims from the Knicks.
Yeah.
Who, he's got like a 48-inch vert and he's like 6'11". He's a crazy athlete. I don't know. There's some young players around the league, but Golden State's going to need. I mean, I don't know. Is maybe Dunleavy? We'll see what Dunleavy's made of. He had a good draft last year, but they need a significant addition to jump from where they're at to And I know Joe loves Kuminga, so I could see them making like the best addition they potentially could make without trading Kuminga.
Yeah, I think the big is the one you can develop. I think they've been overlooked, and it's all about pace and space. I think Draymond actually kicked a lot of this off, this idea that you don't need size. And I think a lot of people mistook Draymond being exceptional for the mold of what other guys could do. And it's not the case. It actually does help you to have the kind of size that Dallas has. But a lot of these guys who become useful bigs, people didn't really expect much from them, and skills were developed out of them. I mean, Hartenstein has become such a great role player for the Knicks. I don't think that, I don't think anything was really expected of him. He kind of bounced around before finding the right place. So I think that's just and you could say the same for TJD, even if he's on the smaller side. This is just somebody who was drafted very late. And I do think that's where Dunleavy, if he's showing his chops, as you say, can show that he's really paying attention to the league. And we should just be honest about this. Bob Myers deserves a lot of credit for what he built the Warriors into. But I think at the end, it didn't really seem like he was burning the midnight oil. I think we could say that much about it. I think finals run after finals run, we could say they didn't have the draft picks to do it, but it didn't seem like they were doing the leave no stone unturned. Dunleavy seems hungrier. And if the results from last season are an indication, then yeah, maybe you can have one of these guys who might pop who everybody else passed over.
It's hard to me, and I'll say it. I know this might be controversial, but it's hard to maintain hunger when you live in Pacific Heights. Just say it. When you live in Pac Heights and your kids go to schools that cost $50,000 a year, it's hard to keep that hunger.
Yeah.
Okay, a couple things. First of all, we buried the lead, which is today was the passing of the logo of the NBA. Jerry West dies at the age of 86, Hall of Famer, one of the greatest college players of all time, one of the greatest NBA players of all time, led the Lakers to 9 NBA finals in 13 seasons. He wasn't just a Hall of Fame player.
Ethan, can you hear Larry? I can't hear him.
I can't hear him. I thought it was me.
No.
It says it's that he's muted right now.
Okay. So Larry.
Hello. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. It sounds a little different, a little far away.
So you guys will have to talk for a minute. I'll have to.
I could take
my audio. I'll be right back.
Maybe I'll take the reins of the Jerry West conversation right now. Yeah. I mean, what more can you really say? One of the most legendary figures in the NBA. A lot of people say that if he had just stopped after his playing career, he would already be one of the most important figures in NBA history. And then he submitted 50 years of executive brilliance, building the Lakers into this absolute juggernaut, having different iterations of what they were. It's hard to even do a top 10 of his best deals. I mean, he was an incredible deal maker and somebody who helped the Warriors tremendously. There's some debate and discussion of how much of the Klay Thompson pick was Jerry. Well, I know Jerry was really big on Klay Thompson. How much of avoiding the Kevin Love trade was Jerry? Well, I know that Jerry was all about avoiding that trade, and Joe Lacob certainly listened to him. And he had that kind of influence that a man has over another man who was once a child and saw a famous Jerry West from a high chair. I bet that's how Joe Lacob first saw Jerry West. So Jerry West's words held sway. But what I really loved about him, just in my brief interactions with him when he was working with the Warriors. I mean, this seems like it should go without saying, but it's impressive at a certain age. He was a basketball nut. I mean, this guy is as an elder senior was watching League Pass every night. It's just it's like an uncommon level of focus. And he was frank in his observations, and he was hilarious in his observations. And I mean, is it okay to curse if I'm retelling something that Jerry said? I got to curse.
You can curse.
Okay, for instance, and I apologize.
Unless Frank's offended. I'm Frank. You don't seem like you'd be
okay. Okay. Well, and I apologize to Harrison Barnes, who's going to get hit by a drive-by here.
The Senator?
It was a long time ago.
A drive-by on the Senator, the Black Falcon?
I mean, look, this is 2016. Harrison Barnes has had a fine NBA career and should feel proud. But back in 2016, there's a lot of discussion about whether to give him a fat extension. Now, I talked about this with Jerry West. We were outside a Warriors practice back at the old hotel in Oakland that they would practice at. And I asked him about Harrison, and he just goes down a laundry list. I can't even tell you everything he said about the flaws and shortcomings of one Harrison Barnes. He started going, feet are all fucked up, his moves are slow, and he's just going down the list, just crushing him. And I go, hey, Jerry, well, what do you think? People are saying that he's going to get $20 million a year in free agency. And Jerry slowly turns to the elevators, which are right in front of us outside the practice. And he does a little Southern man, West Virginia little wave. And he goes, bye. That's what Jerry thought, man. He had takes. He had strong takes.
So he wasn't saying, he was saying that he's leaving, that Barnes was leaving, not that bye-bye. Yes, so I got you.
Yes, that Barnes, we don't want him for that price. Now, they got KD, so that's a pretty good backup plan. It kind of changes things. But that was, that's how he felt about it. And he would just break things down on a granular level and do so with a real passion. And he's somebody, this is a weird thing to discuss in sports, but some people have an aura. Some players are great, and some great players, great figures, they're great, and they've got an aura to them. Like Michael Jordan has an aura, undeniably. There's a sort of charisma to his presence. Steph Curry, as great as he is, I don't think you would say that about him. I'm not saying that to diminish him. I'm just saying it. Jerry West has an aura. There's just something about that guy, a presence. And when he's at Summer League or when he's at practice, there's just something to the man, or was, that is just different, and it changes the energy in the room. And everybody is aware that Jerry West is in your presence. And it was a special thing. And I'm sad that it's no longer a part of our lives in the NBA, and that he was such a fixture at Summer League because he was such a basketball junkie to the end. And it's hard to imagine Summer League without him. So a great man, a great figure. I think there are so many people who are eulogizing, and they should eulogize. And I just hope the Lakers do the right thing, that Jeannie can forgive and forget whatever bitterness, and truly honor him in the way he deserves to be honored.
Yeah, no, he's a huge figure in the history of the NBA. I mean, one of only 3 players to win Finals MVP, most outstanding player of the NCAA tournament, and an Olympic gold medal with Magic and Hakeem Olajuwon. Just basketball royalty. And to me, we had him on the radio a couple times when he had the book coming out, and some of the excerpts from the book were just downright unbelievable. Yeah. Like, he battled depression throughout his life. If you watch the retrospective on his career, it's clear that he was kind of a tortured soul that didn't really enjoy the unbelievable amounts of success that he had. And his father was abusive and beat him. And the story of him having a loaded shotgun under his bed for fear of his father. I mean, what kind of a, I mean, that, come on, guys. I mean, how could that not warp your view of the world and everything along with it? So, and to emerge from that kind of, of, anchor around your neck and to become what he became. I mean, it's 2019. He was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. He's one of the greatest basketball players in the history of the country, college or pro. And then he's kind of like, and I was talking about this before, he's the rarest of rare in that he's kind of like an Ozzie Newsome or maybe like an Al Rosen, where like they were great at what they did as players, but then they were great or greater as executives.
Yeah.
I mean, you just don't see that. That's just such a short list. And I have to throw this in there because just before we started the live stream, I was watching our good friend Larry Beal and Kerry Keating and all the Donald Foyle, and they had a clip from Bob Myers. And Bob Myers said that, on ESPN earlier today that, when he was the Warriors general manager, it was so intimidating because Jerry was like there as a consultant. Here's the greatest GM of all time. And he said, I'm flying down to LA. And Jerry's like, hey, when are you flying down? He told him. He's like, where are you staying? He's like, I'm thinking of staying at the West End. He's like, no, I'll pick you up. You'll stay at my house. And he said he picked him up from the airport. He brought him out to, his house, had him stay at his house for a couple of days. And, it's just like Jerry West, just very, 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 very special guy, very incredibly talented, multifaceted. Yeah. But to emerge from the kind of, childhood he had and to have the kind of achievement that, to have the, up until, I mean, he's literally still on the Clipper payroll to this moment, till the day he died because he was valued as a consultant. Steve Ballmer said he was like my basketball father. So I don't know. To me, Jerry West is just, he's regal. He's special. He's like one of the, I can't even imagine like who would be the Jerry West equivalent in the NFL or in MLB. And it's hard to come up with any.
It's like if Joe Montana was the best GM. It's just hard to really come up with somebody that would match it. I want to say somebody's saying Steph Curry doesn't have an aura is crazy. I think Steph Curry's aura is that he doesn't have an aura. Part of what makes him so spectacular is that he does what he does while looking like a regular guy. I know a few things, but now it's all coming to me as we talk about it. One thing is that I know Winning Time is a TV show and it's just meant to entertain people and people can get bent out of shape about how the depictions don't match reality. But one of the reasons why the people who know Jerry hate that depiction of him is because he's a true gentleman with an incredible charisma. And the character, he has the qualities that, Larry, you're describing from the book. And I think in Hollywood, they hear those qualities and they go, this is a tortured soul. He must be screaming and ripping things up and shouting and everything else. I think Jerry carried that quietly. He might have a temper because he hated losing on occasion, but I think he carried all of that weight very quietly.
That's what you did. That's what men of his era did. You did not complain.
Yeah, and in West Virginia, you're going to be a whiner. I think he carried that quietly, and he, the vast majority of the time, was the kind of gentleman that you describe in that story with Bob Myers. Now, let's talk about his Warriors impact. It's not just about the Klay Thompson non-trade, but also the thinking that goes into it, and this thing of, if you understand basketball, there are two ways to really, I think, if you're betting on basketball, this might be a weird way to describe it, but if you're betting on basketball, a quantitative model can really do a lot for you. But observing granularly, obsessively, and knowing what you're looking for, in many instances, will be even better than that. But you've got to be able to do it. And Jerry was like that. The thing he had figured out about the Warriors when they had Mark Jackson, and Mark Jackson and him were at loggerheads, was that this Klay Thompson guy who's putting up average efficiency and doesn't look that great. I mean, the Wolves wanted him, but it's not like he's regarded as any kind of future star. Jerry understood that the team style of play was adversely impacting Klay Thompson. He understood that. Now, that's easy looking back. We all know what happened. We all know what Clay turned into. Back then, it wasn't so easy. Back then, everybody who knew anything about basketball was saying, you got to trade this guy and get Kevin Love. What are you, crazy? But Jerry understood that the Warriors' style of play was too pick and roll centric, and he was obsessed with how they had the fewest passes in the league. And he would bang on about this, and he would keep talking about this, and he would say, we need to make a trade when it comes to this. And yes, a hard decision needs to be made. Maybe Mark Jackson should not be coaching the team any longer, which was controversial at the time. I'm just so impressed with it looking back because, yes, we know he was correct looking back, but back then, I don't think there was a lot of discussion to that end. And look how it unlocked everything. Look how getting Steve Kerr in the fold, swinging the ball side to side, going from one of the teams that passes the least to passing the most, revealed that, oh my God, you were about to get rid of an all-star in Klay Thompson. You didn't even know what you had. I think that sort of observation and understanding of the game for a guy who was an old man at the time is truly impressive, because theoretically at that point, the game should have passed you by. You shouldn't really understand it so well. You should be like these guys who were saying you got to keep doing post-ups and stop shooting threes and whatever. But no, Jerry understood. He understood basketball, and he understood where the game was evolving, and he understood what the Warriors had to do, even in old age. I find that incredibly impressive.
Let me jump in here and talk a little bit.
Sure.
The NFL counterpart, I would say, and he wasn't a player that Jerry West was, is Ozzie Newsome to me. Ozzie Newsome he's more than an executive. He's a builder of men. And when you look at Jerry West's storied career, the basketball prowess is pretty significant. I think we all know this, but it's the mentoring that I really identify with, the Kobe Bryants, the Shaquille O'Neals, so on and so forth. Also, just his social impact. This guy came up with Oscar Robertson in the 1960s. He's from West Virginia. I'm sure in his development, there were a lot of different perspectives on how America was and the roles of whites and blacks and so on and so forth. And he could have really bought into that. But what he bought into was his love for basketball. And I remember as a young person covering the Warriors, I got a chance to meet Jerry West and Oscar Robertson at the same time in the media room.
Wow.
I walk into the media room. I think that it was some promotion, Larry, and I'm like, holy shit. This is, wow. and it wasn't like Ethan's conversation where we're talking basketball shop. It was more like, Mr. West, how you doing? I'm such and such, and Mr. Robinson, and those guys, kind of looked at me and said, well, how you doing, young fella? And that was pretty much it. They didn't talk a whole lot to people that they didn't know, but they didn't have to. He didn't have to, because I'm a historian of basketball, and I played basketball on a high level. So it was really about his essence, not only as a player. If you watch him, I don't care what era he played in, you watch the tape, you go, okay, this guy's one of the top 10, top 12 players of all time. But it was his essence and impact on the game that I really identify with. And you listen to like LeBron James, he talks in great reverence about what this man stood for and the amount of lives that he was able to change. Magic Johnson talked passionately about Jerry West schooling him after the game about the mistakes that he made. He didn't have to do that. So this guy was bigger than life. As a player, he was a humanitarian, and I think that's what I will remember about him. Let me say something about Stephen Curry. Stephen Curry actually does have aura when he walks in the room. The difference is most great players and most entertainers and people of great essence, they wear their arrogance, and there's nothing wrong with that. All right, Jerry West is arrogant. Oscar Robinson's arrogant. Michael Jordan's arrogant. Steph Curry is not outwardly arrogant. So his aura is diminished a little bit. But when you are around Stephen Curry, I think internally you might not want to give it away, but people feel his presence as well.
Yeah.
On the West, I think of Jerry West, and I just think of just such a special basketball. The impact is just off the charts. I got to ask you this, Ethan, as a guy who sparred at times with Kevin Durant. Frank and I know the one. There's Warrior fans, and then there's Warrior fans who have only been here since they started winning. It's like if you're a Warrior fan and you were there for Winston Garland, you were there for Bobby Sura.
I got a Garland story.
You were there for Les Jepson.
Oh my God!
You rooted on Mokeski. I mean, if you were there through the lean years, you know that Jerry West brought the Warriors tremendous credibility. That's what Joe Lacob really was acquiring. And the Warriors, I wonder, and I've always wanted to ask you this question, Ethan. I'm so glad I thought of it with you sitting here, because I'm the kind of guy that would forget it. Do you think that Jerry had a role in KD's recruitment?
Yeah, I think he had a role in KD's recruitment, but it's hard to know what actually tipped the scales. I know that he famously had a conversation with him about how it was something that he wanted to do, and I think it drew off the experience that Jerry had coming up short in the way that he had for so long before ultimately breaking through. I don't know if that's what ultimately tipped it for KD. I think Kevin Durant is a different guy than Jerry West is. I remember Colin Cowherd was talking about how Kevin Durant's kind of like an artist, Kyrie Irving kind of like an artist, right? They don't maybe care so much about winning as the expression, the height of their genius that they want to display to us. I think there's something to that. Jerry West was built different than Kevin Durant. I'm looking at this interview that I did with him, I think back in 2016. I was asking him about it, and it ends, the final statement he says about it, when I'm asking about his career and everything else, and he just says, for me, I'm just ultra competitive. I will be till they put me in the grave. That's what drives me. Joe and I had a couple of great conversations, felt like he sincerely wanted me, and that he'd allow me to be a voice within our franchise, but only a voice and an honest voice. And the only thing I care about is winning. That's all. If you don't want to win, you don't want to be around me. I mean, that's the kind of burning passion and focus that guy had, and you could feel it. I don't think I ever really felt that around Kevin Durant. No disrespect to him. I know he's not my best friend necessarily. I think Kevin Durant is a basketball genius who cared a lot about being good at basketball. But yeah, I think one of the reasons that Kevin Durant wasn't satiated by what I think would have made Jerry West perfectly happy. I think Jerry West would have been delighted to be in Kevin Durant's position with the Warriors, but they were just built different. And I think KD, it was about something else, and it was about getting credit, and it was about having the doubters stop doubting him. And that's just not how Jerry saw it. So yeah, I think Jerry made his pitch, and maybe it made an impression, but I think ultimately those are just two different mindsets, and those two are mostly the ways they are similar is mostly just to being great basketball players, and not in how they see not in how they see the game necessarily.
One, as we switch gears a little bit, a couple of other topics I want to hit before we get out of here. Go ahead, Frank.
1 second. I just want to quickly, this Aussie rule says, if you don't want to win, what professional sports athlete does not want to win? You would be surprised, Aussie rules in the NBA. You would be surprised how many, I mean, everybody wants to win rather than lose, but for a lot of guys, it's money and it's women. And maybe the winning is somewhere down the list. Not everybody.
I mean, people think, fans talk about everybody wants to win. When you're really in it, you see guys would rather win. You know, there's a difference between wanting to win and would rather win.
Yes.
That's all I'll say about that. It's not that they're trying to lose, they're trying to win, but they're just some guys And it's funny. I was talking to an old baseball scout, and he's like, the trait that you can't find, you can't define. I'm like, what's that? And he's like, there are guys that just show up every night to beat you. And it's like, you know what? It's so true. And I remember when I was in the Canadian League, we had a football scout who's like, Larry, let me tell you. He's like, there's 3 reasons guys play. Some guys play for the money, some guys play for the girls, and some guys play just to fuck shit up. Like, made me laugh. And I love Bill Urbanic, the great Bill Urbanic up in the sky. No longer with us. But a couple questions I want to get to before we finish up here. One is, the NBA Finals are going to the Celtics. They're up 3-0. Another commanding victory tonight. Luka's not playing a whole lot of defense. Dallas is a team that I love if they're within 5 inside the last 5 minutes of the game. They can't get it to that point. Boston was 14 games better than the Mavericks in the regular season. That class is showing in these finals. It's been kind of a humdrum finals. But here's the question I would have for you. If I put out for the next 5 years, and we'll take 5, nice round number. Give me the team in the NBA that you would put all the money you have that would win the most titles over the next 5 years. And I'll give you the contenders as I see them. You never know, but in the West, you got New Orleans is up and coming. Phoenix has got good talent. Dallas has got some talent. Clippers, Minnesota, obviously with Anthony Edwards, Karl Anthony Towns, if he stays there. Denver, a lot of people would say OKC would be their answer. In the East, Boston's the top seed. The 2 seed was the Knicks. The 3 seed were the Bucks. Cavs have a great 4-player mix. Orlando's got a really nice mix. Pacers have a nice combo if they can add to their duo. There's Philly. There's a couple other teams. What do you think? Who next 5 years? Everything you got. One team in the NBA to win the most titles. Who are you going with?
I mean,
OKC.
Okay. Sorry. I'm not. You want to explain why? Or you just picked them? Or you just good?
I mean, I don't think there's much of a detailed explanation other than they've got the superstar, they've got the role players, they've got the defense, they've got some of the stuff that you see with Boston. There's some size away from doing it, but as we established earlier, that's almost like the quality that's least valued in the league. So I don't think it should be too much trouble for Presti to just get them some size. They're ahead of schedule. They could have easily made it out of the bracket if some bounces just go their way. I mean, they're a little bit young right now, but maybe I'm swayed, but when you talk with Sam Presti, that guy is on a different level. That guy is a different level of general manager than the other general managers. I would say legitimately a genius at what he does. And
what's his background? Who did he work? Did he work under West?
San Antonio.
San Antonio. That's correct. Yes, he came through San Antonio.
R.C. Buford.
I'm going to say the next 5 years, maybe Boston if they win this year. It seems like a foregone conclusion, but I don't see any dominant team winning multiple championships in the next 5 years.
That's also true.
And the reason why I say that is because it really comes down to half-court execution, which is why if I'm a Warrior fan, if they could make a move or two, I'm really, really excited. I mean, the Warriors lost a play-in game. I think had the Warriors won that play-in game, they conceivably could have won a couple of series. I think Denver was better. But when I watch teams, it's about half-court execution. Like you look at tonight's game, Dallas could have very easily won this game. The score is 93-90. Luka goes to the basket. Jason Tatum, he has his hands up. He's not jumping out the gym. Luka smokes the layup. If he makes that layup, the score is 93-92. They go back down on the other end. Derek White makes a three-point shot. The score is now 96-90. Game over. It comes down to half-court execution. Until I see differently, the Golden State Warriors are still one of the best teams in half-court execution. So that's what I'm looking at. OKC, not so much. They're not a great half-court, last 4-minute execution team. So that would kind of give me pause. I don't see a lot of teams in the NBA that execute. Denver did, but they fell apart. But that's what I look at. I look at the last 4 minutes of the game, high-level execution. I don't see it profoundly from any one team in the league right now. So I think it's going to be a year-to-year proposition.
I mean, I agree with Frank completely on the year-to-year aspect. This is the new parody NBA, and this is what Adam Silver wanted, and they break up your team once your guys are too good, and you can't even really – you don't even have some of the mechanisms you have in football to keep the guys who really matter. So there's an intense amount of pressure on these situations like you have in Denver. You know, the Denver Nuggets, after they won the championship, I think in the old – CBA would have been able to maybe keep Bruce Brown and keep all the guys and just completely run it back, but they couldn't. And it's different these days. And so I don't know if we're going to see, like we saw in the past, where a team would just rip off a few finals and have a dynasty. I think it might be one team wins 1 year, then another team wins the next year, then another team wins the next year. That might be the NBA that we're seeing. One of the reasons I like OKC, though, is that they've just got so many young guys and so many assets.
Especially
that they've pilfered off of these teams that they can theoretically, for a while, just keep restocking. But I'm with Frank. I don't think anybody's going to rule the decade. I don't see that happening necessarily.
I kind of like Minnesota just because of Edwards, and I just think, if Towns stays there, I like the way they play defense. My God, they were playing ridiculous defense, and I just think Edwards will get more refined. He'll start to take things over, with a little bit more efficiency overall to his game. I like Edwards. I mean, I agree though. I don't see like give you an example in the NFL. The Houston Texans made that Deshaun Watson trade. And if you go back and look at all the assets that they have assembled from that Deshaun Watson trade, it is clear as day that the Houston Texans are the big cloud storm brewing in the NFL with what D'Amico has already established there with CJ Stroud, with the unbelievable talent they have on both sides of the ball. Because of that unbelievable trade. It was like 13 players and picks, and they've turned them into like a bunch of even more because they kept trading back. So Houston took that one Deshaun Watson deal and just absolutely did a bonanza. So they're this young, monster team. Yeah. And maybe Detroit, if Detroit continues to draft well, maybe Green Bay, who knows, but definitely, I think Detroit and Houston look like they're like these young teams that are really coming on. I don't know that I see that in today's NBA. Obviously, I love Wembanyama, but he's on a team that's a ways away. There's a lot of young players in the draft every year, but they're very raw. So it's I guess if I would say Minnesota. The other team I kind of like is if Halliburton and Siakam can add a piece or two in that mix. I like Siakam to have a pretty good 4-year run. I like Halliburton to have a pretty good 4-year run. I think Indiana could be a piece or two away from climbing to the top.
And it's easier in the East. I mean, the West is just been the conference for a long time, and that's the advantage the Celtics seem to have, is they have really separated themselves from the rest of the East. So it's funny though with the Lions. I don't know if we're going to talk NFL.
Yeah, we're going to hit a couple NFL stories.
It's like you hear when they're talking about Purdy and all the weapons and yada yada yada. I kind of feel like, how do you feel about that offense in Detroit? I'm not saying that I prefer it to the San Francisco weapons, the weapons around Goff versus the weapons around Purdy, but damn if it doesn't seem comparable. I think
Detroit, really good.
Detroit has got the better collective offense. They've got a phenomenal line, with Penei Sewell, Taylor Decker, Frank Ragnow. You're talking about 3 anchors. They just drafted this kid, Christian Mahogany, out of Boston College in the 6th round, total steal. So their line is way better than the Niner line. Now, Purdy's better than Goff, especially mobility-wise. But they've got Jamison Williams, who's a home run hitter. They got Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's one of the best receivers in the league. They've got Laporta, who's a better receiver than Kittle. And then they've got the combo of David Montgomery. They're kind of a one-back offense, but they got the combo of David Montgomery between the tackles and Jahmyr Gibbs, who as a receiver, and I'll take those two guys over McCaffrey. I don't care if McCaffrey's considered the best. I like those two guys better.
I mean, you're totally right, I think, but it's so against the conventional wisdom because the Niners, their name brand offensive skill position players are more famous. And so they're regarded as just a better offense. And then the eternal Purdy conversation of him being dismissed and discounted. You're not supposed to say that the difference between these teams is that Purdy is better than Goff because Goff is this, former high draft pick, franchise quarterback kind of guy. But I totally agree. Detroit's offensive skill players seem explosive compared to the Niners, and their line is better. And it just seems like, I don't know, maybe they're Detroit and we're not used to them being good, but that's an offense where I go, that's a lot of weapons. That's a scary team.
The only thing about you can speed up Goff, and then Goff doesn't, then he starts making mistakes, and then there's Dan Campbell. We saw how he managed the game. Obviously, that's not a strength. And they had a really bad D line outside of Aiden Hutchinson, and they had a really bad secondary, but they got 5 or 6 new DBs. So, yeah, I mean, Detroit, their young general manager that they took from the Rams, I forget his last name, Brad, I forget his name, but he's really, really sharp. And so you got him, and you got, they're making great picks. I mean, the tight end's a stud, the wide receiver, all these guys they keep getting are blue chip college players that are great NFL players, and they're just systematically going down their list and building this team, and they've hit on such a high rate that if the line, if somehow Goff cannot screw it up, the Lions probably are a great Super Bowl bet this year.
Here's some irony. It's funny because Larry, I watch more of your football stuff than anybody. All right, so it's a lot of stuff that I learned about football. I mean, I'm aware of it, but I love listening to you talk football because you get into the details, and not many people do that. People talk on the periphery, but if you look, but I mean, you're like who's the Giants announcer?
Dave Fleming?
No, the analyst.
John Miller?
No, Krueger. You like Krueger?
Krueger.
Yeah, you like. I mean, listen. If you want to learn about baseball,
sit down, meat.
Right. Now, here's the deal.
Yeah.
The irony is coaches matter in the NFL. Dave Campbell will sit for 2 hours and try to convince people that his mentality on coaching football is the right thing for them to do. And a lot of people will walk away 2 hours later and go, I'm not so sure about that. So when you look at the personnel, Detroit and the 49ers, very comparable. But I have a little more confidence in Shanahan making the final decision because they got a great offensive coordinator in Johnson. But just in terms of how the 49ers are constructed in terms of making decisions, oftentimes dictates wins and losses. In Kansas City, that coach, I mean, he doesn't follow a script. Sometimes he goes out of bounds and does things that ultimately put KC in a position to win Super Bowls, i.e. last year. I mean, nobody thought he was going to throw a bomb, and he caught that pass to put the game out of the way. So football, to me, is predicated on having great players, but you got to make great decisions from the sideline.
Coaching means so much.
Absolutely.
And because of how many guys there are, because there's a lot to coordinate. Okay, two football questions, and then we'll jet. One is, as far as Brock Purdy goes, let's talk a little bit about Brock Purdy for a second. You kind of jumped in. You sent me a text the other day, Ethan, about Brock Purdy, and you feel like that Brock Purdy, the people that attack Brock Purdy have gotten more aggressive than the people who are defending Brock Purdy. I just feel like at this point, you know what? Scoreboard, man. I mean, the guy's played 25 games. He's like, 21-4. I mean, it's like, scoreboard. It's like, and all these people are like, well, he's got Shanahan. Well, he's got all these weapons. Well, guess what? Shanahan was here. The moment that Brock Purdy trotted on the field, to replace Jimmy Garoppolo, all non-Jimmy Garoppolo quarterbacks under Shanahan with these exact same weapons were 9 and 29. And now this guy steps in as Mr. Irrelevant, and he's 21 and 4 with like 6 touchdowns and 1 interception in the playoffs, and a really good record both in the regular season and the playoffs. And he's like number 1 or 2 in almost every statistical category. So at this point, it's like if you want to attack Brock Purdy, do it at your own loss of credibility, because I've said my piece. People know how I feel about this kid. I think he plays. Alex Smith said it the other day on the radio. It was on 95.7 The Game. He said, quarterbacking, you can talk about quarterbacking all day, every day, and all these different factors, and they all matter to some degree. But he said, ultimately, what it's really about, it's about accuracy, processing, and toughness. And that's what Brock Purdy has over everybody, is that he processes as fast as any quarterback in the game. His accuracy is rare. And even though he looks kind of narrow-shouldered and kind of small, if you're standing next to him, he's actually 6'1.5", 225 pounds, and kind of yoked up a little bit. And he plays the game with tremendous courage as defensive linemen are whizzing by him left and right. He stands strong in the pocket, lets his guys open up downfield. So to me, end of discussion. He's got the toughness. He's got the processing. He's got the accuracy. The ball comes out on time. He wins games. If to me, there's nothing, turn off the projector and go analyze another player, because you already know what this player is. That's how I see it. So at this point, I don't fight back too much on the Purdy stuff, just because it's like, hey, it's kind of speaks for itself in my mind.
Well, it's also, if you get, when I was young, I would defend the players I thought were underrated and being unfairly attacked. I'd get very passionate about it. But as you get older, you realize the career tells the tale. We'll see over time. You might disbelieve this guy, but if I believe in him, I think he's going to answer the bell. And over time, he's going to wear you down, and he's going to force you to concede some things. I saw it with Steph Curry. I'm not saying that Brock Purdy is Steph Curry, but there was this dismissal of Steph and this whole, he's not really doing what he's doing. He's not really a superstar. You can't really win that way. And people didn't expect him to become what he was, but he kept doing it for long enough that they had to admit it. Now, I'm so fascinated by the discussion around him. There's something crazy to me about it. I don't think I've seen a situation like this where the quarterback of the number one passing offense is dismissed by professional analysts and all kinds of other people as average or worse than average. Chris Sims ranks him at 17 among the quarterbacks. I mean, it doesn't make me angry. It's just bizarre. We don't really have this kind of thing happen in basketball. In basketball, if you are producing statistically, we give you a ranking commensurate with your production. They've carved out an exception with this guy, and I find that to be curious. Now, the dynamic that you mentioned, that I mentioned to you, that I find interesting is, have you guys noticed that the longer that this offseason goes, the further Brock Purdy slides down these rankings that come out? I just find it interesting.
Well, to doubt the guy, it's like an industry. I mean, the one that makes me shocked is all these guys like Chris Sims, who couldn't really play the game themselves, but as analysts, they have all the answers. Mm-hmm. I mean, it would be like the number one basketball analyst in the country is, Patrick McCaw or something like that. I mean, it's like, what? I mean,
I'm even okay
Les
with that.
Gibson is suddenly the number one analyst on NBC, even though he couldn't play at all. But you know what I'm saying? He's got all the answers.
I mean, I'm even okay with that because some people are really good at analyzing, and I think Cosell, for instance, does a great job breaking it down, and I can't picture that guy on a football field, right?
That's true. But I mean, that's true. That's true. And they're different skill sets.
But I'm just making the observation because I just find it very interesting that the longer the offseason goes, the farther he falls. And I think it's because nobody's got an answer for it. Because in season, if you're throwing out a take like this Sims
he's playing on Sunday and you're going to look bad on Monday.
Yeah. So, you can talk up everything you feel about how the strength and the size of Trevor Lawrence and everything. But if you actually have to account for your take and he's going to fumble like he often does, and you're going to have to live with that, then you're not going to be so brave and so bold with that kind of ranking. And you're not going to be so quick to dismiss the guy who most Sundays goes out and throws the most accurate ball in the game or near there. I mean, that's what I find interesting about it, is that he keeps sliding the longer this goes, and I'm fine with it. I'm very confident in him. You can call me a homer. I'm a believer. I've been a believer since he first walked in and did not look rattled. I don't think he gets credit for some of the elite qualities he has. I think he is a layerer, is what I would say, with the passes that he does. He layers those passes in a way that's uncommon. And damned, he did not look rattled in that Super Bowl in the fourth quarter at all. I'm a straight up believer. You can call me a homer. You can say whatever about it. And I just hope he stays healthy, because I think if he stays healthy, he's going to prove a lot of people wrong. And I've just got that kind of confidence in it. So, yeah, I'll be the Brock Purdy homer. I think more people, more analysts need to be as positive about him as you are, Larry. But I don't know if it's a Trey Lance hangover or what. There's still a lot of doubt out there, and I just don't get it.
Well, I think it's Jimmy Garoppolo and Colin Kaepernick. This fan base has seen two quarterbacks start fast and peter out, and that's happened recently. So there's that. Well, I like Jimmy. I bought a Jimmy jersey. I was all in on Jimmy, and then Jimmy discovered Jimmy couldn't play. I was all in on Cap. I loved Cap. We went to the Super Bowl. I bought a Cap jersey, and then we discovered that Cap wasn't in the league anymore, and he couldn't do it. Whatever. And then that's if your sample size is that small, then I'm sure you look at Purdy and be like, well, he's gotten off to a hot start, but let's just wait and see. Let's just wait and see. I will say this though. And I'm on the record of saying this. Tanner Mordecai. So here we go. We got this guy. Trey Lance Monday says Mordecai is going to shock the world. Tanner Mordecai is going to beat out Josh Dobbs and Brandon Allen as the number 2 quarterback for the 49ers.
That's a take.
Let me say
that's
this.
A take.
Let me say this though.
Very confident of that.
First and foremost, if you look at the history of football, though, certain quarterbacks mesh well with certain organizations. All right. So I think, you could follow that realm of thinking. We don't have anything else but to see Brock Purdy playing as a member of the 49ers. He's done extremely well. All right. Geography also matters. He plays in pretty good conditions to play quarterback. All right. That's another thing.
But he also played well at Iowa State in Ames, Iowa in the Big 12.
He did. He
he led them to the Fiesta Bowl.
No, he had a solid career. He's also
and went 1-8 the first year he wasn't there.
He's also playing for an organization that is adamant about protecting their quarterback. He has a good offensive line. They protect him. He has the best offensive left tackle in the game in Trent Williams. So he's insulated well. He's played extremely good football, right? There should be no doubt about what he's done on the football field. Now, the one thing that I'll say, Larry, listen to you a lot, I'm not so sure that he has to make $55 million a year. I mean, maybe 40. I don't think because I don't like the upheaval, all of the conversation around, his weapons, if you will. Certain people get paid, certain don't. I'm not skilled enough to evaluate positions, so on and so forth. But emotionally, I think it all matters. And I think they have a good thing now where Ayuk, Debo, the tight end, they all go out there trying to accomplish the same goals. But I think somehow that gets lost when organizations start to differentiate who gets paid and who doesn't get paid. So from Brock Purdy's perspective, I think he's in the perfect situation. And I don't think being in the perfect situation means that you need to be the highest paid quarterback in the NFL.
I hope they can work out a deal. I hope they can work out a number that makes sense. One guy that I got to mention that's in Niner camp, once again, I get granular on the Niners. One guy that I really, really like is a guy who's a basketball player from Ferris State named Mason Pline, who's a 6'8" tight end. And I did an interview yesterday with Brent Jones, and I had a note to myself, mention to Brent Jones that this guy reminds me of Brent Jones. And then I forgot to. And Brent hasn't seen him yet. Next time I talk to Brent, I'll tell him. But he reminds me a lot of Brent Jones. I saw this kid's Ferris State basketball tape, and he's running the break. He's playing above the rim. He's reverse jamming on the break. And I'm like, if you can reverse jam on the break and you're 6'8", and he's got 10.5-inch hands. He was a mechanical engineering major, so he's super smart. I'm like, this is a prospect I would like to see the Niners go after. And sure enough, they signed him after the draft, and he's been looking good in minicamp. So remember that name, Mason Pline. But it made me want to ask you guys, and I wonder, there's so many guys who dream the NBA dream, and the number of guys who are dreaming the NBA dream is way, way too high a number. And there's too many guys who have no chance at a pro basketball career. But if the guys who happen to be yoked up in 6'8", and have natural, bulk strength, because it takes quite a bit, who's the basketball player that, everybody would say LeBron, I'm sure, but who's the basketball player that if you were, if I was an NFL GM, I'd have some intern, and I'd be like, I want you to study every 6'6" to 6'10", or 6'8" basketball player who just is a great athlete, tremendous strength, can run, jump, great hand-eye coordination, but is not going to make it in the NBA and not going to have a pro basketball career. And let's invite those guys to minicamp and see if we can find an Antonio Gates. Let's see if we can find a great Tony Gonzalez. I just think that when I watch the NBA and I see some of these guys who sit the bench who are just jacked and they're 6'8", 6'9", I think, dude, you could be an all-world NFL tight end. Now, there's physicality that goes with it, and you got to be willing to take hits, and not everybody wants to get hit. But I would definitely be on the lookout for the 6'8" guy. Who would be, if I say to you, give me a basketball player that you think would be a great NFL player? And it doesn't have to be a tight end. Like, I always thought Nate Robinson would have been an amazing corner.
Oh, corner.
Or like Pat Bev. Pat Beverly would be an amazing cornerback.
Yeah. No,
just pesky and quick and long and, just super aggressive in your face.
Kid Williams, who played for Dallas, who got traded, who played for Boston.
Grant Williams?
Yeah, Grant Williams. I think he could play.
Ooh.
Yeah.
He's thick.
Yeah, I like that.
He could be a tight end. He's probably super coordinated.
Oh, yeah.
That's the thing.
He's like 6'8", 250, right?
Smart, too. Very smart. He's honor student.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the thing. When you see these guys in person, the NBA guys, they're almost skinnier than what you would think from the TV. There's like a narrowness to them, and that's why the Grant Williams is such a good call right there. I like that call.
Frank, you could probably do it yourself. What did you play at, Frank?
When I graduated, I was about 265. I had tryouts.
So 6'7", 265?
Yeah, the Cowboys sent somebody out, worked me out at Fordham, the Raiders, and the Washington team at the time.
Wow.
So I had 4 different tryouts, and ultimately went to the free agent camp with the Giants.
Oh, you did? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I did. Well, it was in the spring. I never got to the
in this time of the year.
Yeah.
What year?
88.
Wow, so right in their heyday.
Yeah.
Parcells and George Young and the whole deal.
Yeah, and the reason being is because Mr. Mara went to Fordham. So he came on my basketball games. So
Gotcha.
So Mr. Mara told Parcells.
That's Wellington Mara, right? The owner.
Yeah. So he told Parcells about me, and they and I played a year after I graduated, played football. We went 10-2. I played DN and I played tight end. And it was a free agent camp at Giant Stadium. Parcells was there, McConkey, everybody's there. Yeah. And I actually think, because it's interesting about what Alex Smith said, I actually think I could have played in the NFL, but I didn't have the family foundation, because it's athleticism, intelligence, and toughness. You got to have those three things. And I think that I had those things. I just didn't have the knowledge of football. It would have taken me some time. And I didn't have the family foundation. When I graduated from college, I literally had to get out and get a job. But I think I could have played. Didn't necessarily love the game at that point, but I had enough athleticism and ability and want to, and I think intelligence and toughness to play football.
I think of so many guys that I watched through the years just on the Warriors, Byron Houston. How good Byron Houston would have been a hell. I'll say it right now. I used to do the radio show with them, Tommy Tolbert. How great of a tight end would Tolbert have been? Yeah. 6'8", hops, good hands.
Tom could play offensive line, man. Too.
He could have been a tackle. He could have been an incredible left tackle.
No question.
I mean, it seems like such a waste of his exquisite skill set, but what about Luka? I mean, you don't need a burner. I don't think if Luka got in crazy shape.
What position?
I don't know.
Yeah, what would he play? Punter?
I'm talking about tight. The first thing I'm going to target in this exercise that we're talking about, I need you to be a rebounder, because that shows me you can catch a ball, right? That's just like that's an approximation.
He runs a 5'2". He probably runs a 5'2" 40.
I mean, he probably does right now, but if we got to get him in NFL shape, I don't think he can come in looking like that with the man boobs. But that guy is strong as hell, and he gets every rebound somehow.
The middle linebacker would smash him so hard.
I mean, Luke.
I remember watching Karl Malone in his prime, and I thought Karl Malone was as put together a 255, 260 guy as I've ever seen.
I mean, people are laughing. Luka's big. Luka's strong. People bounce off that guy. I like the idea of Luka. What about left tackle Luka? Just throwing that out there. Here's a crazy one. Would it work?
There's almost no muscle development on Luka. That's the other thing. You would think a guy who's a pro athlete would have like sculpted shoulders. I mean, I see kids in high school with sculpted shoulders. How do you play in the NBA and have no upper body muscle development at all?
Those Balkan dudes. I don't understand how they're able to do it. But here's a crazy would it work? Giannis as a wide receiver.
Oh my God.
Would that work? Is he too tall?
Well, he'd just absolutely get crushed. His legs would just get broken in half.
You think he's too tall? I mean, but it's also
you just got to think of all your NBA basketball, guys that you're thinking of have to be like absurdly thick to really have a shot. Like, I'll give you a guy who would be ridiculous, Zion.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Zion.
Yeah, tight end Zion.
Oh
my God.
Or defensive end.
Oh yeah. No doubt.
What is Zion's size? 6'8", 290?
Yes.
No, that guy, you don't even have to that's a good call, Larry. I mean, that's the guy you would.
I'd sign him today. If he wanted to come play for the Niners tomorrow, I'd be like 6'9", 290, you're our new defensive end. Go get the quarterback.
I mean, that would work.
What about TJ McConnell?
Draymond played for Michigan State. I saw him in the uni.
What about TJ McConnell?
He seems like a linebacker.
TJ McConnell.
At safety.
Yeah.
He probably put on about 20 pounds and just roam the middle, knock guys out.
I'll give you one. All these guys who dominate in the NBA at 6'3", like Russell Westbrook. Russell Westbrook would be an amazing football player.
Yeah.
An amazing football player. I mean, look at the way he moves and jumps and runs at 6'3". Right. And look at all the miles on that up and down the floor, and look how he still is electric. Yeah. So he would be one. I think Anthony Edwards would be an amazing wide receiver.
Ooh.
Yeah. Well, he played quarterback too.
He reminds me of AJ Brown, man.
Yeah. I mean, Anthony Edwards would be huge. He'd be like Megatron.
Yeah.
Yeah, Edwards, I think, played court. Edwards said that football is his favorite sport. This is what freaked people out in the draft, almost lost him his #1 pick status, is he was freely saying, look, basketball is my second favorite sport. I love football the most. I think he'd be a hell of a football player. That guy is just an insane athlete.
And just little guys, too, like Davion Mitchell. What's Davion Mitchell in the NBA? He's just a guy. But guess what? You put Davion Mitchell on the Niners as a 6-foot corner, as aggressive and tenacious and tough as he is, he'd be a pest. He'd be a hard guy to get away from. So, those are the guys I think of. But there's just so many great athletes who play college basketball, and you'll see them in the tournament, and then they just evaporate. They don't make the NBA. And I always wondered, what these guys all play in Europe, or just because some of these guys, I mean, if you're an NFL scout, get a camp, get 10 or 12 guys in there and see who's got talent, because man, you hit on a 6'7" super athlete and you wind up with an Antonio Gates. I mean, you're talking about changing your football team dramatically.
Gentlemen, let me give you guys a name before I forget also.
Yeah.
PJ Hall.
The big man in the draft from Florida or Tennessee or wherever.
From Clemson.
Clemson. Oh, I knew he was orange.
He may have been that
gigantic big man.
Yeah, he's 6'10". You were talking about that Lane Beer type comparison. He kind of reminds me of that type of guy. Shoots the mid-range perimeter shot, tough as hell. He might be around 55, might not get drafted, but I think he's going to play in the NBA. I think he's going to have a career. So keep
my favorite guys in the draft. I'll give you. This draft is the most crazy draft I've ever seen. It's so raw. Everybody's so raw. It's just ridiculous. But so I can't tell you. I don't know every single player, but I love the shooting of Baylor Shireman from Creighton. 6'7". He went to Chicago. He looked awesome in the Chicago pre-draft camp at 6'7", and he's a Klay Thompson type shooter. I mean, this guy is a big time shooter. In the intermediate, he's just money too. So I love Baylor Shireman. I love the UCLA big man. I think his name's Adam Bona. 6'10". He's actually like 6'9", but he shot blocker, runs the floor. I love that guy. I love the guy that you said, Frank. Is Harrison Ingram? Is that his name?
Yeah. Yep.
Love that kid. And then I like the Duke combination. And it's funny, I was talking to Bill Duffy the other day, and he's not a big fan of either one of these guys. But I like the kid from Sacramento, McLean, who's a freaking great shooter. And Bill said he's only got like 25 or 30-inch vert, so that's not good. So he's kind of a below the rim kind of a guy, not a great athlete. But man, that kid can shoot. And I like the gigantic big man from Duke, Filipowski. I like him in the 20s. I'd take a shot on him. I think he can pass. He's a developing shooter. He makes good basketball plays. He needs skill development, but he's not bad. And I kind of like the guy. Is it Yves Misi or something like that? The 6'11" shot blocker
from Baylor.
From Baylor, Yves Misi. Yeah, he looks crazy. But it's a raw man. This is a crazy raw draft. All right, last thought on the way out the door. Ayuk. I couldn't do a show without mentioning Ayuk. There's somebody in here who's like, Krueger, you're going for clickbait talking football. No, I'm not going with clickbait. Ethan likes to talk football. Frank likes to talk football, and they know I like to talk football. But Ayuk, let's just say, we know what the ceiling is. It's $35 million AAV. It went to Justin Jefferson. We know, according to Mike Silver, who I trust his reporting, the Niners offers probably around $26 million AAV. So between $26 million is what he says they're offering, and $35 million, which is absolutely the top of the wide receiver market and not where Ayuk belongs in honesty. This thing's probably going to get done, but Matt Mayoko is starting to whisper that the Niners may let him play out on the 5th-year option at $14 million and just chalk it up to a loss and try to get him signed next year. I can't imagine they would tell one of their star players, just sit there and we're not going to extend you and risk the negative vibes that could come from him throughout the year. Let's just say, for the sake of conversation, that he wants $32 million AAV and their offer is we ain't going higher than 28. We're at 26. We'll go to 28. We're not going to 32. He says, I'm not coming in unless you give me 32. You pay him, you make him play it out and maybe risk that he's going to be a negative influence, or do you trade him?
I like having him play it out. Maybe he's going to be a negative influence, but this isn't the NBA. In the NBA, guys can actually do that. They can withhold their services. They can be a Vince Carter if they're a star and tank a season, and you have to just trade me to the exact team that I want you to trade me to for pennies on the dollar. That's not how the NFL works. In the NFL, you've got to show up every day. You've got to earn it. And if he tanks a season being negative as a wide receiver, that's only going to hurt him in his ability to get a contract. So, I mean, look,
you would think, but the only way that's done in the NFL is guys who then get nicked and injured. Instead of coming back in 2 weeks, they come back in like 5 weeks.
But here's the problem. I think it's already been demonstrated, and this is a weird thing. I'm not anti-Ayuk at all, and I'm very pro-Ayuk, but it seems like outside of the Bay Area, there's not a lot of pro-Ayuk sentiment. I mean, have you guys noticed that no team, no fan base, for whatever reason, is craving and yearning for Ayuk? It's just what I notice. I'm just, I'm not, inside the NFL.
A lot
world.
of the great traits of Ayuk that make him special are things that the average fan on other teams who follows other teams wouldn't see. Like week 1 against the Steelers, where he runs 45 yards down the field to block ahead of a Christian McCaffrey, run. I mean, there aren't too many star receivers that would do that.
Yeah. And I'm thankful that he made that catch in the rain against Green Bay in the fourth quarter on, I think it might have been 3rd down, because the season might have ended right there if he had dropped that, right? So you can take for granted some of these high leverage plays that he made in the postseason. I'm pro Ayuk, but for whatever reason, it just seems like nobody cares about him. He's not a burner. So I think there's that, and people don't really fear him in that way. I think they like that he's blocking, but it's kind of like, well, that's cool, but that's not the primary thing we pay a wide receiver to do. So that's not something that we're ultra excited about. And I don't think that defensive coordinators are necessarily scared of him. I don't think the Chiefs defended Ayuk in a way that was any different from a way they would defend the average wide receiver. So if you're trying to get paid up in that $30 million range, it just doesn't seem like the market is out there, which is why I think there's all this bitterness right now. I think Ayuk feels like he deserves this. The numbers say that he deserves this, but it seems like nobody else out there seems to think that he deserves this, including the teams that the Niners are trying to trade with. So I just look at it as it does kind of feel a little bit like his leverage is evaporating, and he's going to have to either come to the table and do the deal that's there or play it out. And if that's a problem for him, that's a problem for him. But he's not really demonstrating that there's teams out there that really desperately want him. And that's not what I'm seeing. So I think the leverage is just, it's in the 49ers hands right now, and they can't pay everybody. They've given out a lot of lavish deals. As you said, Purdy's coming up. Receiver apparently is a position that you don't necessarily need to have, and you can win a Super Bowl. It seems like that can happen. So, I mean, yeah, I that's how I see it. I'm not trying to do tough talk. I'm not trying to say, hey, I don't even care if he's mad, or, I don't even care if he doesn't play, but I just see it as you've got to make hard decisions. You've got to make choices, and they can't pay everybody. So he's got to take the deal, or he's got to play it out.
Larry, where was Ayuk drafted at? No, he's drafted in the first round, but where?
Like 25, I think.
Right. Okay. So I would look at the St. Brown contract. He's getting 26 a year. And what's the top guys getting? 35. We got to get somewhere between 27 and 30. We're not going more than 30. Now, if you sincerely communicate to him how important he is, I think that they can do a great selling job to keep him in the fold. But there is a 49 tax, all right? There is a 49 tax. There is a Shanahan being in his offense tax. And I think compromise needs to be at the forefront. Now, one of the things that's interesting about the 49ers is McCaffrey seems to always get top dollar. He always appears to be the number one running back, but everybody else needs to compromise. And, well, we have to look at all the contracts, but not McCaffrey. So explain that to me. I don't understand.
He's Teflon. I don't want to make it seem like.
But that's the problem. That's a conversation.
You're totally right.
He's the number one running back in the game. I mean, it's kind of like Trent Williams is going to get a new contract too. Why? Because he's probably still the number one left tackle in the game.
You're
But
totally
these guys are
right.
egomaniacs. So you know what I'm saying, Larry? I think you should be able to get a deal done with Ayuk between 26 and 30. And if he's so adamant, then we got to look at some other things because they can't pay him more than $30 million. They can't do that.
No. I mean, it's a hard cap. It's a sport with a hard cap.
Larry, you're completely right. He's the number one running back in the game. But I also agree with Frank that he's kind of Teflon. And Shanahan just waxes just these odes to McCaffrey and his wonderfulness in a way that he does not do for Ayuk. And I could see if I was on the Niners, I feel like this was underplayed. I don't want to make it seem like I think McCaffrey's overrated, but it was odd to me that he had as poor a Super Bowl as he had. And it's like we don't even talk about it. I mean, that's the strange thing with the Teflon aspect when it comes to McCaffrey. Maybe that's something
because he had the fumble. You're saying he had the fumble in the Super
It was
Bowl.
more than the fumble. He wasn't good. He had a touchdown on a gimmick play. He had one pass that he caught where he did make a move. He got a good gain in the fourth quarter or late in the game. He didn't break tackles. I think the fumble influenced how he played. It wasn't just the fumble.
Well, I'll tell you what influenced how he played is 337 touches. That's what, and I asked Shanahan about it last week. I'm like, hey, he had 337 touches. What do you think of that usage? Is it likely to go up or down? He brought up the point that, if you go down, if you're throwing, let's say Hail Marys and it's covered and you check it down to the running back, you could do it 5 times a game. And technically none of those are running back calls, but he touched it 5 times. And I get that, but he did kind of admit that they would like to bring that 300 and I think it was like 279 rushes. They'd like to bring that rush total down.
As they should. I don't want to make it seem like I'm critical of a player who is just unimpeachable, right? He has everything that you would want to have. He has all these great qualities, but it's just weird to me the way we analyze these guys. And when I listen,
special status. I mean, that's the thing. It's like the Jimmy Johnson thing. I treat everybody differently.
Yeah, it's just weird on 95 the game or whatever. And, I like Bonte, but they're always talking about, Purdy. If he was really a top quarterback, they would have won that Super Bowl, yada, yada, yada. And I think, what about their offensive player of the year running back fumbling, squandering a possession right there? But maybe even more important than that, his longest run after that, I think, was 11 yards. If you ask somebody, when did McCaffrey break a tackle in that game on a run? They couldn't tell you. People say, oh, well, they were, stuff in the box and everything. No,
they used him too much in the regular season. They have all these other backs. They don't use them at all. They need to get to they need to make sure when they get to the playoffs this year that there's more in the gas tank for George Kittle and for Christian McCaffrey. And that means spotting them in the regular season. And that means playing Jordan Mason a little bit, playing Mitchell, playing Garendo, playing, using some of these other guys.
Let me ask you a question. My guy from Missouri, who I like, Larry, has he flashed or he has not? How's he look?
Cody Schrader, the running back?
Yeah.
Oh, he's amazing.
I told you he was good.
He's amazing. he had a run the other day in practice where he bounced it outside, and then there was some there's some players standing between me and him. So there was another opening. So I had to wait for him to I couldn't see him go. He ran behind their bodies. And all of a sudden I'm looking let's say on the 40-yard line, and he bounces out at the 45 of the other side of the field. I mean, he was cooking down the sideline, and he ran the distance. He went for a touchdown. I mean, they clocked him at 4.61. He's field fast. So forget that 4.61. This guy plays 4.45. And I'll tell you, it's funny. I spent all of the spring wishing that the Niners would draft Blake Corum from Michigan. Mm-hmm. And they didn't. He went to the Rams instead in the 3rd round. And then they signed this kid as an undrafted free agent. God, if they're not the same freaking guy, man. Right. I mean, 5'9", 5'10", 215 pounds, tackle breakers, great leaders. Schrader looks big. Schrader to me has looked better than Garendo.
All right, that was one of my guys that I saw that I tweeted about and told you about. I thought he was going to be pretty good.
First team All SEC running back.
Oh yeah. Now, I mean, my whole thing though with the Niners is compromise and collaboration is for everybody. Even Trent Williams. I mean, the 49ers literally salvaged his career because he was talking about retiring as a member of the Commanders. They brought him here. He's been everything and more that they wanted him to be.
Oh,
all right.
Great.
Everybody needs to be a part of that conversation. And I mean, even Brock Purdy, to me, I don't think is adamant that he be the highest paid quarterback in the NFL when all those conversations are about people compromising and potentially taking a little less to keep this thing together. Because
I agree.
You know, and I know, football is the one sport, and maybe baseball to a certain degree, where chemistry, camaraderie, and brotherhood matters, which is why you can have a team that sucked last year all of a sudden spring up, and they're pretty damn good to great the following year. And then the year after that, they're not so good because chemistry matters.
Oh, I mean, it matters huge. It matters huge. I think chemistry in football is the most important part of roster building of the major sports. It's roster building nuance is how you build your roster in the NFL. I'll give you an example. The 49ers, for the most part, don't go sign a ton of free agents from outside from all over the league. They typically re-sign their own guys, and they sign maybe one or two great free agents. 2 years ago was Mooney Ward. Last year was Hargrave. Now, Hargrave didn't necessarily play all that well. But when you go sign top-tier guys, top free agents, they walk into the room, nobody's like, hey, man, I deserve that money. No, you don't, because you're not as good as Mooney Ward. No, you don't, because you're not as good as Javon Hargrave. But when you pay a bunch of middling players, like the Commanders signed 20 free agents this year, there's going to be guys that are going to be in that room who haven't been taken care of. They're going to be locker mates with guys who have been taken care of, who they're better than. Mm-hmm. And when you make 4 or 5 or 6 of these decisions, it ruins your chemistry. So the Niners, I think they're Lynch as a former player, this is where Lynch has been a really good GM, is he understands that there's a room and there's dynamic in that room, and the money's got to jive with the dynamic. And if it doesn't, you can't, it's not like you can just have a bunch of guys randomly making a bunch of different things and it all works. There has to be a rhyme and a reason as to why certain guys get more. I'll give you an example. Bosa. One of the issues that the Niners are going to have here is that, and Matt Barrows brought it up to me the other day on the radio, Niners have not said whether they're going to waive Brandon Ayuk's fines if he doesn't show up. He's already incurred over $100,000 worth of fines, and if he doesn't show up in training camp, he'll occur 3 times that. So they waived Bosa's fines last year. Mm-hmm. And if they don't do the same with Ayuk this year, that's going to be a bone of contention, and that's not going to go unnoticed in the room. But I'll say this: this is Jimmy Johnson. I treat I've got one rule: I treat everybody differently. In other words, if you're Troy Aikman, you can fall asleep in a meeting, but if you're Curvin Richards and you fall asleep in a meeting, you're going to be on the waiver wire, and somebody's going to be driving you to the airport in 45 minutes. So it's like different rules for different guys. It's the talent tolerance thing that, exists in all pro sports. The more talent you have, the more tolerant will be of your idiocy.
I feel like there should just be a quick conversation. It should be the conversation that John Lynch was once a part of when he was on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Warren Sapp was completely out of his mind, being crazy, being disruptive. And John Lynch and Derek Brooks came to Tony Dungy and they said, you've got to bench him. This is out of control. You've got to bench him. He needs some discipline. And Tony Dungy said, okay, well, here's the thing. I love both of you. You're both Hall of Famers in my book. But I can win without you, and I can win without you. I can't win without him.
Ouch.
Well, that's just how it is. There are levels.
Meek Mill.
As simple as that, man. Simple as that.
Meek Mill. There's levels to this. That's right.
Yeah, that's just the way it is.
That's a great response.
Oh, it is. Because it's true. It's honest. I'll say this, too. What I love about Shanahan, and a lot of people, and what the players love about Shanahan, is that Shanahan is real nice in the media,
Mm-hmm.
but Shanahan is a ruthless MFer.
Oh yeah.
As a play caller and as a dude. And so if you want to go and complain, he's going to tell you what the color of the sky is in the world that he's living in. And if it doesn't jive with what you see there, you know what I mean? He's going to lay that out there. I mean, Jimmy Ward was like, hey man, I want to be paid as a free safety. And he's like, you know what? Do you want to play? Because we need you as a nickel.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we need you as the nickel. Well, he's like, well, nickels don't make as much in free agency as free safeties. He's like, well, but we have a starter at free safety. His name's Tayshaun Gibson. If you want to start, maybe you should play nickel. And it's like, that's harsh. And
Right.
Jimmy Ward got pissed and left, and not for a whole lot of money in the offseason. He just went to Houston for like $6 million. So I'm just saying, it's
who did he learn from? He learned from his dad.
Yeah, Shanahan is there's a ruthlessness there. That's going to do it for us, man. I love rapping with both you guys. Ethan Sherwood Strauss, House of Strauss. Kev is working on trying to help you grow your platform, but you obviously have tremendous things going on. Is there anything that you would like to tease, Ethan, or you got you coming out later this week, or something you want to tell the audience about before we jet?
I've got some articles that I'm interested in coming out later in the week. Eventually, we got to get honest about some of the WNBA drama in a way only I can. For those who don't know, I basically stopped doing the formal media where I work for The Athletic or ESPN, as I feel like it gives me flexibility to say some of the things I was saying earlier.
Well, go ahead. Don't bury the lead on this one, because did you have strong feelings about the way Caitlin Clark's been kind of treated in the WNBA? Do you feel like it's an issue?
I just feel like we're being gaslighted by much of the media. It's like people who are protective of the WNBA don't want to just be honest that a lot of these players don't like her. It's not the end of the world. It's not the biggest tragedy, but all this stuff where, it's simply a basketball decision and we're getting the best basketball players for the Olympic team. And I mean,
they left, by the way, for people who don't know, they left Caitlin Clark off of the U.S. women's Olympic team.
Yes. And
that's what you're referring to.
In the NBA, they always, or not the NBA, the Team USA for the men's, they would often have a young rising player that they were trying to mold and give experience. Anthony Davis, when he was young, was on the team. That's not uncommon. I don't think that this is just about that. They clearly seem to resent her. They clearly seem to resent that a lot of people want to watch her when they weren't watching them. And nobody's being honest about what's going on. There's something interesting where Joe Fan, who just arrived to the WNBA, I think has a more sane take on this than people who are steeped in it in the media, because they're very protective of this league, because there's a lot of sensitivity around it. And maybe if we could just get it out in the open and we could just be honest about it and say that there's some resentment there, we can have a real conversation. But it just seems like the conversation is pretty fake right now. And it's a lot of, the thing I hate most is professionals in media condescending to fans and telling them they don't know what they can clearly see is going on. And there are a lot of levels of that conversation, a lot of contours of that conversation. I am powered by subscribers. It allows me to be more honest than other people on certain topics. I'm not saying every topic. And it's been going well. And I appreciate what your son is doing, helping me get out on YouTube and try to be in some small way someone who's emulating Larry and all his incredible success.
Yeah, right.
The godfather
it is
YouTube.
It is true that this is a story that has really grabbed hold. Now, the only thing I'll say is that just because something happens between the lines doesn't mean that it's sport. Bertuzzi drove some hockey player's face into the ice. It was assault on in the midst of an NHL game that's physical, but it was assault, and that's really what it was. And to me, it's all just about, Fernando Vigna. Do you remember when Albert Bell just absolutely destroyed Fernando Vigna running from first to second? And Fernando Vigna is a buddy of mine who was from Sac, and I went to Sac State. I've always been a Fernando Vigna fan. Interviewed him a bunch on the show. Great dude. So I've always been kind of partial to Fernando Vigna. and Albert Bell outweighed him. Albert Bell's like 6'2", 230. Fernando Vina was like 5'9", 180 or something like that. And he just destroyed him. And the thing was, it wasn't a baseball play. That's not baseball. You don't just throw a shoulder and launch a guy, 20, 15 feet in the air and, have him land on his head. That's just not baseball. And so people push back on that. And all I would say is that the hit on Caitlin Clark, that was not a basketball play. That was away from the ball. It just wasn't basketball. So and I think there should be some people that should, I think that we should just push back on anytime we see aggression and towards anything outside the realm of the sports. If it's just a hard foul, like I'm for the quarterbacks getting hit and I'm for hard hits in the NFL, but that's like hitting within the game. These are just taking somebody out, like a guy's running down the sidelines in an NFL game and he's going to go for a touchdown. And some guy comes off the sideline and trips him. You can't have that, right? So you got to really push back on things that really are not part of the norms of the sport. And what I saw with that Caitlin Clark thing was just that, I don't know about the latest one where the girl's saying that she flopped. Okay. Have you seen LeBron? LeBron flops all the time.
Yeah.
But the hit on her where the girl came from, Kennedy Carter hit, that was just not basketball. And that's why I think it stands out to people. If it had just been, she's going to the lane and she got a hard foul and she got knocked on her tush, you know what? I think, that's welcome to pro basketball. But this was not a welcome to pro basketball. This was kind of like, I'm mad at you. And that's the way it played, at least to me.
There was a weird energy to it, but to me, it's like, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's not like Clark just showed up to the WNBA and all of a sudden there's this resentment. People have been saying stuff like this within that sport on the college level for a while.
She's overrated or whatever.
Well, there's this discomfort. It's this whole focus on fairness and, why haven't we been paying attention to these people who deserve to be paid attention to? And it's almost like they're very much caught up on ought and not really just rolling with what is. It's is versus ought. And there's a lot of, it ought to be this way. And the fans ought to be obsessed with Asia Wilson or these other players. And I think in some of the male sports, there's just more of an understanding of, this is what it is. People are more into the small guys playing basketball and want to buy their sneakers.
There's a lot of Steph comparisons. There's a lot of people. Kerr compared her to Steph. And Steph got a lot of that too early on. Like, hey, he's not quite, I don't know, he's not physical enough or whatever.
You know what it is partly? There's so much intersectionality in this conversation. But the WNBA is on the cusp of actually making money.
Yeah.
And when those money, when the money's not there, nobody really gives a shit. All right. But now the money is there. And the conversations get bigger. And guess what? There's a certain awareness that Caitlin Clark, if she doesn't have, she needs to acquire because it's a different environment. It's not the safe environment of the NC2A or the Iowa community. A la my favorite player in the league, Sabrina Ionescu, whose father used to drive a cab around San Francisco talking about how great his daughter is. She understands the social dynamic that is at play within that professional community. And I think that Caitlin's going to have to understand that it's almost like if there's a level of awareness there, somebody needs to groom her. Maybe it's Sabrina. With regards to what you said, that is a horrible play. It has nothing to do with basketball. That should not happen. But the dynamic by which all of these variables are at play in the WNBA, Caitlin can't act like they don't live in the air because they do. And
I'm not aware, not to interrupt you, Frank, but I'm not aware of the WNBA structure. Is Caitlin Clark make more money than these other ladies? Absolutely. Or is she on some rookie scale like L rookies or something?
The answer is she is on the rookie scale, but she has endorsements and sponsors. They can't prevent you from making money outside of it, and that money is going to dwarf it.
$1 million State Farm commercial,
Yeah,
$28 million
she's making
night.
millions.
I mean, come on.
But she's also producing millions for the league, right?
Yeah,
Well,
but they seem to
not for
care
the
more
players.
about the attention.
Yeah.
Like it's the iron law of institutions where people care more about their power within an institution than the power of the institution, which isn't how you should view it theoretically. And it almost brings us back to the whole, some people really want to win, some people want other things. But it just seems like for whatever reason, this league, there's just not that kind of focus. And there's
because the
this
money's
whole
not there. You can want to win when you got money in the bank. All right. So first and foremost, every NBA player, every professional athlete's priority should be to establish yourself in that environment. Once you do that, then you never stop focusing on winning. But establishing that I can play in the NFL is priority number one, as far as I'm concerned. Otherwise, my ass is back home. And I think that the WNBA players are in that realm.
What is she as a basketball player? Has she established herself as a WNBA player of note or not?
I think so. I think she's doing very well.
She dropped 30 with 7 threes. The shooting was a little shaky, but you can clearly see it. And the defense's reactor, I think it's a joke still.
Great passer.
Her team is terrible.
Yeah. Somebody said she's just a 3-point shooter. Is that true?
No.
I don't think that's true at all. I don't think that's true. But look, rookie year. I don't think she's right now what she's gonna be. I think it's a fairly this whole idea that they were just choosing the best possible players. What can you do? We can't have her on the team. The way that works is the veterans on that team didn't want her there. Mm-hmm. That's how it works. And that's why it went the way it went. And there's just been that vibe to it. And I guess there are a few different reasons for it, but it just doesn't seem to be great for a sport that could really take off. And it's interesting, but that's just one thing I might be writing about. I might be talking about other things.
Seems like there's a Tiger Woods comparison there, by the way. Doesn't there? Like when Tiger came to golf and there were guys that were like, hey, I don't like all the people are running to go see Tiger while I'm putting.
That happened.
And all of a sudden it's like, hey, there's this resentment for Tiger. And then the other the counter is always like, hey, you should be freaking grateful. Tiger's bringing, eyeballs into the tent and he's producing revenue. And I think there's a lot of that dialogue going back and forth here too. Like, hey, you know what? Guys should appreciate Caitlin because look, she's getting through to the casual fan and growing the league, and you should all appreciate her. But I agree with Frank. There's also she's got to exist within that league peacefully and I just kind of wonder.
Vipers.
There's a lot of. It seems like there's a lot of cattiness here. That's all.
A lot of cattiness, a lot of media sensitivity because it's women and it's a crazy fan base. And if you say the wrong thing, then people will freak out and you'll get aggregated. So everybody's like tiptoeing around it. But yeah, here we don't care. We're independent media. We say whatever we want to say. That's what's cool about it. Some of my articles are free. Some of them are behind the paywall. I would recommend checking out the latest one. It's called Why the Hell Did Adrian Wojnarowski's Dan Hurley to the Lakers story happen? And if you check it out, you'll see an example of some of what I'm trying to do. And it seems to be working. And I appreciate the platform you're offering me tonight, Larry. And I appreciate what your son has done for me as well. So it's
he's a great
all
kid.
Of us in independent media.
He's graduating this weekend from Cal Poly. It's gone by 4 years. It's gone by in the blink of an eye. We're really looking forward to seeing him graduate, and he's helped me tremendously with this channel, and I'm glad that he's helping you. And he's a great kid, and he's my secret weapon. He's my secret weapon. Why do I have close to 50,000 subs and unbelievable growth in 2 years? Well, a little bit of it is me, and a lot of it is Kev being kind of like just the jack of all trades. So he's going to Europe with his girlfriend for graduation for a month. So if you suddenly you see this channel hit the skids, you'll realize it's Kev running through Paris that is costing my channel millions of dollars.
It's like stick figure graphics, for a month. It's going to be interesting.
You see me on here. I'm talking to 11-year-olds. Bobby, I got to go. My mom says it's time for dinner. Wait, come back. All right, that does it for us. Frank, when are you going to do In the Dungeon again? Give people an idea of how often you fire on your channel, on your YouTube channel, and let people know where they can find you.
First and foremost, you gave me a retweet about 3 or 4 days ago. Did wonders. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
What was the topic again? Do you remember?
It was probably about NBA, maybe like post game of a game 2, and Danny Hurley, potentially going to the Lakers. That didn't work out, but I got a lot of traffic, and I think one of the things that's been really, really cool is the strong content. People show up, large numbers, small numbers. People show up. I'm gonna try to do some work this summer, trying to build the audience, but I'm very proud of the content. The content is really strong, and people are receptive to it. And that's really what we're about. We talk about sports. We talk about hip hop music. I do movie reviews, and it's kind of a thing. On Sunday nights, I'm very consistent. Between 8 and 9, I start. I generally do around a 2-hour show, and I'll pop in throughout the week at sometimes as well. People can subscribe. You look on the screen right there, In the Dungeon Show, if you like it, and hit me up at Big Frank Red on X, and it's all good. Ethan, it's first time meeting you. Really appreciate your insights, and you're already successful, but continue success. No, you are. So this is a lot of fun. This is a lot of fun getting together with people who really know their stuff and really care about this. I'm not somebody who really does a real good job promoting myself, but I think that, Larry wouldn't have me on. Larry would not have me on if I wasn't good. So
there's no doubt about that.
So that's enough. That's enough. And, I thank everybody for supporting me out there, and pleasure meeting you as well.
It was great meeting you as well, Frank.
Ethan, you haven't gotten a taste of Frank's music, but I'll play a little "Make You Feel" on the way out here, and we'll call it a night. But here we go. Here's a little Frank Red. Frank, who are you collabing with here on this track?
This artist, her name is Sonorelli, and she's an international artist, great singer, beautiful, and I got another record coming out next month called My First Coach.
Looking forward to it. Here, as we thanks to Ethan, thanks to Frank, thanks to all you guys, thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of the Krueger Show, and we'll play you out right here with a little Frank Red, "Make You Feel."
You miss your shot at life. You think there's nothing else for you to do. This ain't a tragedy, son. I know I've seen a few. You're not responsible for somebody else's thrill. Your integrity's intact and you're still trying to climb the hill.
Thank you, Larry.
I was a lonely man.
Good to see you, Frank.
I never thought it would come true. But sometimes in life, all you have are your dreams and you. That's when you
really enjoyed this. Hope you enjoyed the live stream.
life
Have a great night, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Krueger Show.
And accept God's will. But it's funny how it makes you feel.